A white-haired man stared forward as someone raised a crown. Kneeling before him was the arrogant king of the humans, apologizing for everything he had done wrong and offering the throne so that his life might be spared. The long-bearded man, the pure-blood vampire Julius, continued to stare, and as everyone expected, the war ended with the victory of the vampires. He stretched out his hand, but a flash brought a cut. The king's head fell. Humans would now have to live like cattle under the order of the vampires. Everyone, desperate, began to scream, but Julius only gave the order to kill everyone in that place. All this so that the glory of the age of vampires would be eternal. On a battlefield, absolutely everyone lay dead. Two men approached a group on the edge of a cliff, asking if they weren't the last ones. The one on the left commented that everything ends too quickly when there are so few humans, and the one on the right told them not to fear death. The pain was only temporary. However, a mother with her children in the background said that the vampire's days of oppression were numbered. In her dreams, God had revealed that the human was being sent to save humanity. The men, however, stared in confusion, wondering what this strange woman was talking about. At that, the other man told her not to worry, because she wouldn't have a tomorrow anyway. Just then, he lunged towards the first man, and the blonde one warned that they were coming. He was face to face with the knight. The knight managed a vertical slice, passing through the middle of him. However, the vampire disintegrated and reappeared at his back. When the knight turned, the madman had already struck him down as well. The blonde one came to help but was torn in half, while the last one there was trembling and crying and was struck down next, a sword thrust into his chest. Another figure came from behind, landing a direct cut on the vampire. But the attack was easily stopped with one hand. He then broke the sword and tore that man in half too. Another body fell to the ground, and the vampire advanced toward the mother and her children, saying that death would be swift. He raised his arm, but just as he was about to strike, someone called out Yukaliu. It was his friend, who told him to look to the side where there was another knight. This scene perfectly aligns with the character and abilities of the protagonist from the Webtoon corpse knight Gunther. The seemingly unstoppable man who smells like a corpse is indeed Gunther, a resurrected knight who is humanity's last hope against the vampires. His undead nature makes him immune to fatal wounds, such as being stabbed through the heart. While the scene you described is characteristic of Gunther's encounters with vampires, the specific name Yuka and Calcio for the vampires do not appear to be prominent or officially recognized characters within the series. It is possible they are minor characters from a specific chapter, or their names have been recalled differently. Here is the text written in English with the correct spelling and the protagonist identified. A strange figure arrived in the midst of the smoke. The vampires asked who he was, and if he belonged to their army. However, one named Yuka said that he didn't smell like a living human, but like a corpse. Gunther shot his leg forward and launched himself in their direction. The vampires laughed at his audacity to attack, but in a second, his hand was already in front of the first one's face, grabbing him and smashing him into the ground until he exploded. The vampire, almost completely disintegrated, couldn't understand what was wrong with this bastard. The man had covered 300 meters in a single leap, and his friend was now disintegrating on the floor. At that, the one called Calcio focused, rushing forward to slash at Gunther's legs. Seeing the perfect chance, he drove his sword right into the middle of Gunther's chest, but it remained stuck there. He asked why the man hadn't dodged, certain that the attack had struck his heart, and that he would die at any moment. However, the knight simply reached out, grabbed him by the head, and lifted him. The desperate vampire demanded to know how he was still moving with a sword in his heart, but Gunther didn't answer. He plunged his fist into the creature's chest, disintegrating him. Also in front of everyone, the blonde woman is there, emotional, calling out for the hero, but he notices that only the children have survived. He tells her to keep moving forward, that in 3 miles she would find the Holy Land where they would have protection. The emotional woman continues to celebrate, saying he must be the hero sent by the gods. However, he is confused by this and begins to remove his helmet, which has nails in the chin, revealing a head that is all stitched up. He asks if she really thinks he looks like a hero. The children are paralyzed, unable to say anything as his nose then slips off. He bends down to pick it up, and they are even more terrified. They scream that he is a monster and run away. The hero is left there laughing, saying that this reaction was to be expected. In this world, a rumor circulates about a knight who was half vampire and half human, and who was immortal. The scene flashes back to an earlier time. Men dressed as plague doctors find a body in the middle of an arena. One of them says it's wonderful, he had died, and was still in a fighting stance. Someone asks if this is the so-called Gunther, and another confirms it is. 228 fights in the arena and 228 victories. One of them also mentions he had 0 defeats, and they know he was the greatest gladiator of that era. However, not even the most powerful human could defeat the vampires. A stout plague doctor, however, asks Irene if it is right for them to entrust their future to a stranger like this. She says she will take the risk and believe in this man. He asks about the condition of the corpse, and she explains that it has already begun to decompose, but it can still be used. She then approaches the body and says that the times call for a hero, and that is why they would make him immortal. He is reborn on top of 1 billion corpses, and someone praises his work, saying that he has survived once again. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and sees the plague doctors in front of him, celebrating that his eyes have opened. They ask if he can understand what they are saying. Confused, he wants to know what happened. He is certain that he was dead. Linner explains that Gunther was reborn to save humanity. Obviously, Gunther doesn't understand what they're talking about, and the bald man orders someone to bring a mirror. When the object approaches, Gunther asks, "What the hell is that?" The guy had no arms, no legs. He had nothing. What a disaster. What is this monster? He asks. Arian simply says that he is not a monster, but humanity's last hope. Linner clarifies that his brain contains a life support device, something they only managed to create once. As long as that device is working, he cannot die, even if his entire body is torn to pieces. He tells him not to worry, the arms and legs are stored right there, built with special muscle engineering. The arms were already the size of a bodybuilder's, yet the fibers generated dozens of times more force than normal. As humanity's greatest gladiator, and the best equipped with these muscles, they believe he can fight face to face with the vampires. Gunther, however, is no longer shaken and wants to know if he was really brought back just to fight vampires. Arian tells him to understand that he is the perfect candidate, and she knows he was also killed by vampires. So, for the good of humanity, he should fight for everyone. Gunther replies that this whole saving humanity thing is nice and all, but no. However, he has one condition, so she better come closer to listen. The bald man, Linner, approaches excitedly, saying they will consider anything he asks. But Gunther traps the man with the stumps of his thighs, yelling to be let go of this damn thing. Now, Arian calls out to Linner, and Gunther just says that he became the strongest gladiator because he learned to kill without hesitation. To him, both humans and vampires were selfish and small-minded people. And for him to be reborn in this state to fight others, it's because they are idiots. What he values more than anything is not other people, but his own life. And that's why if she doesn't want to see this guy's head explode right now, she better attach his arms and legs and let him go. Arian, looking a bit shocked, glances at a clock. He asks if she's waiting for the man's head to explode, because she says he doesn't have much time. He doesn't understand, and she says he has about 4 seconds. When he asks what she means by that, something happens in his brain, and apparently he dies. The man is released, and someone comments that, as expected, he's out of control. Gunther opens his eyes again and is now face to face with the bald man once more, who asks why he did such a cruel thing. His jaw itches. Gunther wants to know what happened, and the scientist explains that just like any animal or machine, you need power to move. And the power source for his body was the life essence of a human, apparently coming from Arian, who is standing nearby. Gunther asks what they're talking about, and Arian says it's exactly what he thinks. For him to stay alive, he has to be connected to her through the device and take her life essence. When the connection is cut, he can move for a maximum of about 2 hours. In desperation, Gunther asks, "What the hell is this?" The bald man says this reaction is expected, but it's best he believes it. Everyone's entire life, along with the survival of humanity, is at stake in this research. They call the people who receive these devices human batteries, and of the hundreds who volunteered, only Arian survived. It was something extremely difficult to create, so Arian might forever be the only human battery. Gunther tells him to explain better. The man says it's exactly as it sounds. He can't just fight for his own life, he will have to defend hers as well. This is because, without her, he will only last a couple of hours before becoming a wall decoration. The other option, obviously, is to receive humanity's aid and fight against the vampires. But in the end, it's he who makes this choice. Gunther is there trying to process everything he has heard when suddenly someone calls for Hainer. Another plague doctor runs in, saying they have an urgent problem. The bald man is about to say they are handling something important when the newcomer starts to mention the vampires, and a sword pierces through his back. His body falls to the ground, and a strange-looking vampire, resembling a sewer rat, enters, announcing that Lord Benzel sent him to bring back all the humans and beautiful women. Another strange figure on the right agrees, saying that's exactly right. While everyone is surprised, Wondering how they got into the base, one of the doctors asks Hiner what they are going to do. Meanwhile, Gunther is already shouting, telling them to connect his arms and legs if they have any love for their lives. The bald man gives the order, but everyone is hesitating, saying they will die if they get close to that thing. To which Gunther replies that they will lose their general if he dies. The men argue that they are only 4 people, they don't need a general. Arian says she will buy them time and tells them to connect the rest of his organs. The doctor hesitates, telling her not to do it. Even Gunther tells the damn woman to stay put. However, she is already face to face with the vampires, who wonder about all the courage she is showing by coming alone. She should know they are superior in every aspect. But the first arrow flies right into the middle of a vampire's face, only for the damned creature to catch it in mid-air. She warns that the bastards talk too much. However, the vampire shatters the arrow with his hand and dodges aside like a shadow. Even so, she fires another almost perfect shot. But the vampire dodges, she ducks away from another attack, and he dodges again. Now, he has closed the distance, landing a solid kick to her stomach, slamming her against the wall and grabbing her by the neck. The strange vampire stares at her, and says her face is beautiful. He adds that Lord Benzel will like her very much. However, the other vampire approaches, saying he wants a piece too, because he got the last 2. In the middle of their discussion, someone says they're just playing around. But before the vampire could turn, a kick smashed into his head, making it explode against the wall. Arian celebrates, but is immediately grabbed by the head by the other vampire, her head nearly bursting like a balloon. Gunther warns the damn thing to be careful, because his life now depends on her. All battered, she replies that someone had to do something. He gives her a look and says it's fine. Just then, the vampires rise, and begin to reconstitute themselves. Gunther is shocked that the bastard didn't disappear even after having its head blown off. Arian then explains that to kill a vampire, you have to destroy its heart. It's the only way. One of them rushes forward while Gunther throws her out of the way. The creature goes to land a punch directly in his chest. However, Gunther just stands there, laughing and staring him down. The fool doesn't understand and gets his head blown off again. While that one dies, the other runs past, heading for Arian. But the protagonist comes flying in like a torpedo, and headbutts the other one, causing him to explode against the wall again. Linner is in disbelief. It's the first time the boy has used this body, and he's already moving so naturally. It wasn't just that he was winning, it was as if he had been born with these bodily modifications. Furthermore, it seems Gunther had already realized that, despite his absurd strength, his speed wasn't as extraordinary. The only way to be fast was to use his leg muscles to launch himself. Strangely, he had adapted in a second. And Arian notices immediately that this strange man was enjoying the fight. He picks up the vampire's head, and says that now he's had enough practice with the body. The vampire, however, wants to know what he is. Have the humans created a monster? Gunther chuckles, saying those words are a bit cruel to him. After all, he was just born. He raises his hand to deliver the final blow. However, the vampire tells him to wait, saying they could make a peace treaty because he has something very good to offer. Gunther tells the man to speak, and the vampire says that Lord Benzel is nearby. They are Benzel's creations, and as soon as they die, Benzel will notice their presence disappearing and will appear there. Even Gunther would have a hard time fighting against the man. Gunther asks why Benzel would avenge trash like him. The desperate creature shouts that it's because Benzel loves them. He is the only one in this entire world who loves them all. Besides, if Gunther just hands over the girl, he'll let everyone else go. Gunther glances over and says, "You can take the bald guy. The other one is not for the taking." The vampire responds that he cannot give up the bald man. At that, Gunther says that, unfortunately, negotiations are over, and thrusts his hand through the vampire's chest. The offer had been rejected. The same thing happened to the other one, who disappeared crying out for Benzel. Gunther wants to know who this Benzel is and why everyone adores him so much. She explains that he is a high-rank vampire, and in the world of vampires, they are classified by the purity of their blood. The high-rank ones are purebloods who are born naturally, and the low-rank ones are those born from variants of these other vampires. Apparently, he remembers images from his past because he comments that the black-haired vampires all seem to be low rank, and she confirms this. The high-rank ones have white hair, and are weak to the sun. The problem is that they can use their own blood to create numerous weapons during a fight, and are extremely powerful. The two are chatting when Hiner arrives, wanting to know if they didn't hear what that man said. The so-called Benzel would be there in an hour at most. Gunther asks if the bald man really believes it, to which he replies that it doesn't matter. They should at least be prepared. and an hour wasn't enough time for them to fight. Just then, Arian says that first, they need a clear answer on whether he will fight for the humans or not. The protagonist stops to think and says that, just as he had said, the most important thing is his own life. And apparently, the only way for him to survive is by cooperating for now. Arian thanks him, saying it was a noble decision, while he asks to be connected before it's too late. She says that's fine, but first, she has a little present for him. That was when he received that weapon from Roland. He's now in a new suit of armor with a tiny head, looking like one of those bodybuilder memes. Strangely, the bald man says it looks wonderful and fantastic. He wants to know what Gunther thinks of it. Everything was selected after numerous tests, all to ensure he had the perfect look of a heroic knight returned from the dead. Gunther, however, says it seems a bit old-fashioned, that he looks like the humans of old. However, Arian explains that this armor was refined with mithril. Furthermore, each part was separately applied to his body to make it easy for him to change limbs even while wearing it. This was all thought out because in a fight against vampires, who are extremely fast, he will take a lot of hits. So it was necessary to minimize the damage he receives. Additionally, he can look at his wrist, where there is a marker. That is literally his battery life. It's the time he has left to stand. Since he is already connected to her, it reads 2 hours. Just then, however, the entire ceiling begins to shake. Everyone notices the impacts coming from above, one after another, and realizes something is approaching. Gunther senses it is something gigantic. The doctor, however, responds that those bastards died not even 40 minutes ago. Gunther simply tells them to cut the connection, and asks what the plan is to escape. Arian then explains that they are in a catacomb beneath his hometown, which was the place designated for his creation. And that door in front of them was the only exit and the only entrance. He replies that the damned woman should have told him that sooner. Seeing that he has no choice but to deal with all the noise, he puts on his helmet, telling her not to show herself, no matter what happens. Now, behind the helmet, he becomes enraged and stares down the entrance of the doorway amidst all the darkness. 3 strange, bald-headed figures appear, giving a little wave. Everyone is confused by their arrival, but it's clear they are more terrifying than anyone else. Now that I notice it, our protagonist this time really does have a guts fight. The weird vampires are smiling, saying they were the ones who killed their families. Gunther wants to know if they mean those ugly, low-rank vampires. If so, then yes, he killed them all. And he did it quickly. The one in the middle laughs, saying it's impressive for a human. Those vampires, however, were souls who had been abandoned by their parents, which is why they had such ugly appearances. He finds it very sad that the boy didn't feel pity for the miserable way they died. Gunther asks Liner if this Benzel guy is right in the head. At this, Liner asks if he is the face collector. Benzel's peculiar heads say yes. Liner states that they are even, because Benzel's forces killed several of their colleagues, so a fair offer would be for each to go their own way. The heads are all relaxed, saying it's not a bad idea, especially since the sun is about to rise. It's just a shame that they made an oath to Lord Julius, an oath that all humans in this world would be killed. Sorry, Baldy, there's no negotiating. Gunther then asks what he's going to do all alone with his 3-headed body. He won't be able to handle it. The heads, however, begin to laugh, calling him a funny human as several more heads begin to emerge. What they say varies from mouth to mouth, and they explain that the reason low-rank vampires exist is to protect the high-rank ones. If sunlight didn't exist, they would truly be immortal. The real Benzel is in the midst of all the heads, using them as protection from the sun. Gunther asks if this is really a vampire. For Arian, it was obvious. All those heads were connected through blood, and the name Face Collector now made more than enough sense. However, she's sure there must be some core connecting everything to manage so many connections. But in the middle of her thoughts, the heads come rushing in to bite her, and the attack hits like a magic spell. A puff of smoke rises, obviously. Gunther saved her. He can't lose the only person keeping him alive. He tells her not to just stand there, but to run to a safe place. She tells him to be careful, because if he can't find the core, the fight is pointless. However, he just tells her not to worry so much about him, and to take care of her own life. Benzel, however, approaches the other fallen man to bite him with his heads. But just then, Gunther arrives with a powerful punch, leaving him completely confused. Before he can understand what happened, a second and then a third strike sends him flying, with Gunther warning that if he can't find the core, he'll just destroy everything until it appears. Liner is impressed that he's going head to it with a high-rank vampire. As the heads are being destroyed, Benzel says that this is incredible, he truly has monstrous strength. He's never heard of a human hero this strong. They want to know if he is, in fact, human. Gunther replies that it's none of his business and lands another punch in the middle of everything. But suddenly, one of the heads from within bites his armor, and says that he's finally been caught. This is because the jaw strength of these heads was the same as his fists. In other words, the moment he started getting bitten, there would be no escape. Gunther goes to use his other arm for another punch but ends up being bitten again. In a second, he's got both his legs and arms trapped. And Benzel says he has a little present for him. He would now visit the true hell that exists within. The next chapter begins by telling the story of an abandoned garbage dump and a crying child. More than obvious, that child missed its mother and was crying for help. However, days passed, and no one heard that desperate cry. Eventually, the child's crying came to an end. From that moment on, the child gave up on finding the warmth of relatives or anyone who wanted to save them and began to search only for the heads are biting his armor, and Gunther notes that it is indeed a very strong bite. 2 or 3 heads would be manageable, but the problem is there are hundreds of them, and they are all attached to the main body. With his limbs immobilized, he doesn't know how to get out. He imagines there must be something at the core, but he has no idea how many layers of heads there are. If he fails in the end, he needs at least a plan B. However, from the depths, someone says that these disgusting vampires would not pass. A voice shouts, warning that it would defeat all of them. Gunther doesn't understand, but a multitude of what looked like human heads began to speak, saying they were not defeated and would not give up. At that moment, a hand appears above him, and a strange, all-black demon emerges, saying that one of the heads was a great hero known as Albert Lauren, who saved hundreds of people, but was now part of this collection. Gunther remarks that these heads are on top of a pillar of hair and must be very valuable. Enzel confirms this. These heads belong to heroes who sacrificed themselves trying to save others, and he chose the most beautiful ones to put on display. Their noble spirit of sacrifice will continue to live on until the day humanity perishes. He asks Gunther if he doesn't find this hell he created wonderful. The protagonist says it's an impressive place, but it will be difficult to put his head there. Enzel, however, tells him not to worry. The strength and determination he showed were impressive, better than any hero he had ever seen. Gunther interrupts, saying that Benzel doesn't understand. The problem is that he is incredibly ugly. His head would look horrible in the collection. A confused Benzel asks if he's really that ugly, and the protagonist tells him to take a look. When the helmet comes off, Benzel breaks into a cold sweat, unable to understand, wondering what kind of human this is. It was the ugliest thing he had ever seen. Even the other vampires were more beautiful. Our boy looks sad, saying he never imagined he'd live to be called a monster by a monster. Well, now that he's seen his face, he could let him go. A confused Benzel asks if he really believes he's going to get out of there. Gunther replies that he thought it would be impossible, but unfortunately, he saw a glimmer of hope. And now that he knows he can shoo his way out, he's going to have to fight. With that, he takes a bite out of the first head, tearing it from the arm. Benzel looks on but starts to laugh, asking if he really believes he can shoo his way out. He has to understand that this is far from enough. No one has ever left this place. Gunther, however, continues biting, saying that he isn't just anyone. He was Gunther, and headbutts another one. No matter what happens to him there, he swears he would survive. The demon continues to stare as more and more heads approach. Outside, everyone sees what looks like a hornet's nest. The plague doctors think he's been killed or eaten and wonder what to do. The bald man insists, saying he warned them he wasn't a good choice and tells Arian it was the worst possible thing to put a corpse knight in a place like this. They shouldn't have placed the hope of humanity in such an idiot. Arian, however, points for them to look. Several small heads were falling, and in the midst of it all, he suddenly appears, throwing a punch. Instantly, the bald man exclaims that he always trusted Gunther, that he was the hero. The protagonist lands with a thud and immediately tries to move to the side, where he sees another pillar of heads. But then, someone asks, where are the boy's legs? He was moving only with his hands. Gunther announces a change of plans. They have no chance of winning this in a one fight, so they'll handle it this way, with Arian on his back. The plan was to run until the sun came up. Another head comes to bite him, and he leaps amidst the cemetery, fleeing with her on his back. Arian then reveals that she brought some extra body parts for him. She hadn't told him because he hadn't accepted the proposal yet, but she also had some modified ones that served as weapons. He, however, thinks there won't be time to equip anything and that they might risk losing everything. First, they had to create a distraction. He makes another leap, or rather, a lift with his upper limbs, since he's using his hands. During this escape, the demon sees Arian's face and smiles, saying she was too beautiful. Instantly, he starts running desperately, declaring that he wants her for his collection. She had to be a part of it. Meanwhile, Gunther is hidden, remarking that she seems to have gained a fan. How long until sunrise? He asks. She replies that if it's the same time as yesterday, about 5 more minutes. The good part was that the exit was clearly visible, so they just had to wait for a chance to jump from this place. However, while they are hiding, the bald man and the other plague doctors are trapped behind some bars, screaming for help. The protagonist says it's very sad to see a human life being lost, but it's a shame that he's going to use all of them as a sacrifice and escape peacefully. He warns her that this is the best choice for the future of humanity, so it's best she doesn't do anything stupid. However, she is staring at him, and he notices. She continues to stare as he realizes he's going to do something terrible. At that moment, Frieren steps out from behind a pillar and calls out to Benzel, saying she's waiting for him. In an instant, the monster stops attacking the others and turns towards her, forcing Gunther to move. He grabs her and starts running, telling her to stop doing stupid things. Now that they are near the back of the arena, they have no choice but to leave the area. He runs towards the door and throws himself through it, but some of the small mouths lunge from below, nearly managing to bite him. He hits the wall of the staircase and immediately starts running again as the heads pursue him, screaming that they are moved by such courage, and that he urgently needs to become part of the collection. Gunther continues the climb, and Frieren shouts that they are almost in the sunlight. But then, one of the heads grabs his arm again, telling him once more to become part of the collection. "Let go, you bastard," he yells, punching his own arm to break free and launch himself forward. Finally, he escapes the underground and faces the rising sun. However, the second he relaxes, Frieren calls out to him, she's being pulled back. One of the heads says that in the end, they got one. And it seems they did, as Gunther screams in desperation. As one of the heads that captured her comes into contact with the sun, it turns to ash. Nearby, some of the other vampires call out to Lord Benzel, asking if he's alright. He replies sadly that he failed to avenge his family because of that monstrous night. The deformed monsters tell him it's okay, the important thing is that he's alive. The spirit of their family will live on, and everyone will be happy. Benzel, however, warns that the knight is not someone they can handle. They can't afford to lose any more family members. He will have to deal with this problem personally, and for that, he says he needs more faces. At this, one vampire says it's alright and reports that they've brought 34 faces that are perfect for him. Another says he brought 7, a third says 2. Benzel celebrates, calling everyone wonderful. Incredible work, he says, turning his attention to Frieren. But even so, it's this one I like the most. He tells her to relax, that soon she will be inside him. Together, they would be one until the end of humanity. Meanwhile, Gunther is shouting, telling the damned scientist to reconnect him quickly. Linner asks for calm, saying he can't do anything in a hurry. Gunther tells him to look at his fist, he's running out of time. Soon, he'll be paralyzed, and that will be the end of everything. He then asks if they can't just get another person to act as the human battery and power him up again. Linner asks, if that were possible, would he not save her? Gunther just gives a little laugh, who knows? Maybe he wouldn't. The scientist then explains that, unfortunately, creating another human battery is impossible. The device inside him doesn't regenerate a corpse, all it does is deliver power to a dead body to mobilize it. That's why bodies that are completely dead for too long cannot be revived, which normally happens within 3 days. Gunther understands. If he dies now, his body will decompose for 3 days until it's impossible to restore him. Linner confirms this, explaining they took too long to get to the arena because they received the news of his death at the Colosseum too late. The plan was to arrive before decomposition began, but unfortunately, that wasn't possible. Furthermore, creating a new human to serve as a battery would take several years. In other words, if they don't save Frieren, he is also dead. A bit confused, Gunther asks Linner to just explain how the device works, and where it was found. However, Linner says he unfortunately can't tell him that yet. As they begin to trust each other more, he will gradually find out. The protagonist starts to get up. "Where's my right arm?" Linner says he has something special for him. Since close quarters combat against Benzel is difficult, how about something for long range? Gunther smiles. That's interesting. Back with Benzel, a captive is crying in terror while the vampire approaches with open arms, telling him to fear nothing, it won't hurt. His blood touches the man's hand, flows from it, and begins to consume the person's entire face. Benzel says that his blood is his instrument, and his sighty. With that, a headless body falls to the ground. Another face has been collected. He smiles through it, saying that his blood is also his will. The people in the background are frozen, afraid of being next. He then turns to Ariane and says, "You're next. Finally, we will become one." But she just stands there, staring at him. He remarks that she has a lot of determination. Eyes that carry strong honor and fortitude, showing no fear even in the face of death. I look forward to the moment when those same eyes are consumed by fear and regret. However, Ariane replies, "The only truth that scares me is that no one has ever been able to save your heart." Benzel moves his hands, saying that she is very impressive indeed. He is eager to see the look on her face when he is inside her. As he is preparing his blood to approach, someone calls out to him. Another man attacks, saying he waited for him to lower his guard for this perfect moment. He comes in for the stab, but is obviously and completely immobilized. He shouldn't have called out the man's name. He should have just taken the chance to strike true. Benzel's allies apologize, saying they didn't think there was a knight among the faces. Meanwhile, the captured man shouts that even if he fails, some hero will succeed in ending his miserable existence one day. Benzel approaches and says he loves finding a hero full of courage like him. It was truly a pleasure. When he sees the disgusting faith that humans have, that someone will save or avenge them, he finds it impossible to contain his laughter. He then holds up a grotesque hand. It became that way because he tried to save some people from a fire. He vividly remembers coming out of those suffocating flames, the pain of his flesh burning. And does he know what he got in return? Praise for being a hero, and the respect of the people. He got that for a short time, and soon the feeling turned to disdain, and he was treated as someone despicable. The hero tells him to stop lying, that it surely isn't true. Benzel, however, says he can prove it. He easily removes the blood from his face, revealing the corrupted, melted flesh underneath. The hero is shocked, and Benzel says that this is the exact reaction that all the people who once called him a hero began to have. Eventually, he was no longer welcome anywhere. All this not because he did something wrong, but because he saved someone and ended up with a disfigured face. Everyone had turned their backs on him. He hides his face again and says that the sacrifice this new hero is about to offer will also be in vain. Because in the end, everyone just ends up getting hurt. The hero screams that the fact he suffered in the past doesn't give him the right to massacre people like this. Benzel, however, says this isn't a massacre. One day, they will finally understand what they were trying to achieve. He cuts his hand, bringing blood to his face, but someone then says that he talks too much. When Benzel looks to the side, something flies past, slicing off his disfigured hand. Stuck in the wall above is a giant ash-colored pillar, looking like a tree. It seems no one could have guessed that Gunther had something that shoots a giant iron spike. Gunther wants to know what design disaster created this thing that's impossible to aim. Ariane calls out to him, and he celebrates that she's alive, worrying that if she had died, he would have killed her. Benzel comments that for Gunther to have walked all the way there alone, he must be eager to die. But Gunther just tells him to stop the chatter and come at him, as he's short on time. One of them would have to die in a few minutes. The little weapon the doctor made for him is a bone launcher. The name was created without much thought. It's one of the modified weapons the bald doctor developed, adapted to create firing force through muscular energy. Basically, they are specialized muscles that contract backward, pull, and then release with full force. The object is thrown, shooting out like a bullet and piercing 4 or 5 walls. The disadvantages are clear. First, the muscle has to contract to fire, and second, it only has 6 shots. Gunther comments that this damn thing is almost useless, but at least now he can face this guy from a long distance. The doctor is getting agitated, saying they have to kill Benzel at all costs. It would be impossible to escape without getting past him. And even if they could save him and flee, they wouldn't be able to get away from the other low-ranked demons who would eventually lead Benzel to find them again. And considering Gunther's body needs to restore energy as quickly as possible, this guy urgently has to die. Gunther prepares himself, tells him to relax, and takes a leap, declaring that he can guarantee everyone else might die, but he will survive. Back in the catacomb, Benzel notes that it wasn't difficult to track him there. The problem, however, is that Gunther only has 15 minutes, and in that time, he'll have to act as quickly as possible. Benzel comments that his weapon was disgusting, but it doesn't matter how powerful a shot it might have, since he has numerous layers of protection and nothing could penetrate them. As soon as he says that, Gunther fires a shot that opens a crater in the cluster of heads. He warns that his aim is bad, but he'll get the hang of it soon and hit the heart. Strangely, Benzel tells his allies to protect the rest of the faces. They argue that it doesn't make sense, they should attack the boy and hinder his movements. He agrees but tells them to be careful. It seems he really cares about those things, which is even weirder. The first two come forward, saying they'll finish off this strange weapon. Gunther, however, warns the bastards to stay away, that he doesn't want to fight them. With that, he punches the first one, shattering it on the ground. However, its core wasn't destroyed, and it emerges behind him, grabbing him by the neck, saying that a disgusting monster like him couldn't kill it. Gunther, however, grabs its head. He says the vampire isn't strong enough, blasts the creature away into the sea of heads, prepares for another jump, and dodges an attack from Benzel while other vampires swarm below. He stops for a second, turns, and punches one in the face, then goes to elbow another, asking why the bastards aren't afraid to die. One named Romano dissolves, but at the same moment, the one from before reconstitutes from the ground and grabs his foot, saying they will forever protect Benzel because he was the one who treated them with dignity. All of their lives belonged to him. As Gunther wondered why these creatures were acting this way, he suddenly felt something. The damned Benzel had opened the mouths of his heads to bite the protagonist 1,000 times over. The little monster even taunts that the boy seemed proud of his new arm, so this time he'll start with the most important part. Gunther closes his eye and fires a shot straight up, blasting a path clear of heads. He dodges to the side as another attack strikes his back, thinking that now he only has a measly 3 shots left. The problem was, how could he know where the real Benzel was within this mass of heads? He needed a solution. Suddenly, Arian shouts for Benzel. Gunther is confused about what she's doing as the other vampires approach her, telling the wench to be quiet. Gunther still doesn't understand, but then a red slash passes in front of him. It was one of the damned vampires, not an attack from Benzel. He retaliates with a punch to its head and finishes another. He takes another step back, fending off the heads that continue to swarm him. Strangely, Arian is desperately screaming Benzel's name over and over, and Gunther doesn't get it. But then he notices one of the vampires behind her, telling her to shut her mouth. Arian screams one more time that Benzel is a disgusting monster. The vampire guarding her is losing his patience, telling her that it doesn't matter how much time she tries to buy, it's irrelevant. But at that moment, Arian tells Gunther to notice that only some of the faces were reacting with expressions. Furthermore, those same ones began to move before the others, probably the ones closest to him. Instantly, the vampire covers her mouth, saying she's talking too much and that he's going to rip her tongue out. However, he is interrupted by a shot right through the middle of the heads. Gunther comments that now he noticed it perfectly, some reacted much faster. And in the middle of the hole he created, there was Benzel. Desperate, Benzel screams that it doesn't matter if Gunther knows where he is. He can protect himself with the heads and hide again. He tries to reconstitute, but part of the nerve network that connected those heads had been severed. He knows he has to reconnect them, but Gunther tells him to wait a moment and fires another shot, this time tearing off part of his arm. The monster desperately realizes he has to run, but Gunther just says that the heroic shot is coming. At the same time, vampires attack from both sides, throwing themselves at him. He is submerged in a pool of monsters, but he fires one more shot, and hits Benzel squarely in the head. Good heavens, the brute can really aim. Arian comments, a vampire has to be killed with an attack to the heart. And now, he had no shots left. In other words, they had lost. Gunther, however, asks what this losing nonsense is and continues killing the vampires. He musters a last bit of energy, and prepares for one more leap, saying it's time for the final attack. Arian tells him not to do it, but he says he's going in with his own body, and launches himself at the regenerating Benzel. As he approaches, Benzel accelerates the regeneration of his eye to see him coming. The next chapter begins with a big-headed, strange-looking boy asking his father if his sacrifice for the humans was worth it. They treat him like a monster, and his appearance has changed. Maybe it wasn't a good thing. At that time, this strange boy didn't know what he should believe or what he should do, and now he realizes how innocent he was. Someone places a hand on his face. It appears to be Lord Julius, who says he has been watching him for a long time. He wants to create a new world, but the process would be difficult and painful, and he needed the help of people like him. It seems this was Benzel, after being bullied. He asks what kind of world. Julius answers with something we don't hear, and the boy seems impressed, replying with something we also don't hear. Then, Julius extends his hands and says they should follow this path together. The boy lowers his head and answers, yes. Back in the present, Gunther has driven his fist through the middle of Benzel's chest, smiling and saying that this time, he won. Benzel's last question is how Gunther could be a hero while having the face of a monster. With that, all the desperate vampires begin to dissolve as Gunther loses consciousness. Some time later, a carriage travels through the forest. He wakes up in it, no arms, no legs, nothing, but at least he is alive. Connected to his head. Arian tells him to move carefully, as the device is important and can't be broken. However, she also thanks him for his hard work. Thanks to everything he did, countless lives were saved. Gunther praises him, saying he didn't think a newly reborn man would already be capable of killing a high-rank vampire. He asks if the rest died as well. Gunther confirms that they did. All were connected by Benzel's blood. Instantly, Gunther concludes that the easiest way to solve everything is to kill the pure blood vampires, since the rest will vanish with them. But Arian replies that, unfortunately, the last pure blood vampire, named Julius, disappeared after the Emperor's death. Gunther wants to know how strong this man is and what his powers are, but she explains that nobody knows. No one has ever survived a fight with him, and it's also possible he's never even been in a fight. There are no stories to tell. Gunther finds this strange. Vampires normally drink blood to survive, so why are they killing humans? Gunther agrees but says that, unfortunately, their only option is to protect themselves. He tells them it's best they go to the office so Gunther can better understand everything that's happening. Gunther wants to know if there really is any city that has survived. The bald man explains that the last remaining place is the Sacred City, where all the survivors gather. He adds that it is also where they conduct all their experiments, and figured out how to create his body. It is the last land that humanity still controls and it has not fallen for 100 years. From the carriage, Gunther tells him to look at the city he will have to protect with his life. The entire place was in flames. Gunther asks if this is part of the look. The next scene begins with a white-haired man waking up startled, as someone tells him that Benzel is dead. He immediately gets up, wanting to know who killed him, if it was the enemy. He starts to cry, saying the enemy is coming to kill him and screaming that he doesn't want to die. A giant shadow holds him, saying it's okay, there's no enemy. It was a shame Benzel died because he was an adorable little vampire. What the shadow doesn't understand, if this was the work of humans, is how Benzel could have been killed by a common being. Julius orders someone named Ian to find who was responsible. A small mouth appears in mid-air, and then disappears. Obviously, Julius does not seem pleased with what has happened. We then see Beryl, the place that was considered the sacred land. The biggest advantage for humans to have settled there was its perfect topography. It was located at the end of a continent, past a passage through numerous mountains. The island where it existed had enough land for harvests. Around it, everything was difficult to climb stones and rocks, and the only way to reach that place was a 100-meter bridge. With such an advantage, one troop could normally block 10 others in an attack. The question that remains, then, is what is happening? Gunther wants to know why it looked like everything was being destroyed. Gunther has no idea. When they left, the place was perfect. Just then, the bald man calls out to someone named Leonard, who seems happy that he is safe. He was worried the bald man would be the first to die. He looks at Arian and says she doesn't need to worry, as she also returned safely. He tells her she can call him Leonard if she likes and then looks over, asking if the man is Gunther. It seems everyone already knew about the experiment. Seeing the device coming out of his head, Leonard seems displeased. He makes a clicking sound with his mouth, and Gunther immediately wants to know why the bastard is reacting like that. Gunther tells him to relax, explaining that Leonard is responsible for Beryl's protection team. Clearly, the job is not being done well. Leonard says that everyone can come in, because they have already dealt with the ardent fire. Gunther, however, wants to know what left the sacred land in such a state. Leonard explains that, unfortunately, the area outside the bridge was abandoned. It was no longer possible to defend that place. The bald man comments that it should have been easy, since they killed Benzel. Leonard asks incredulously how they did it, and Gunther declares that of course, it was him. Even so, the man doesn't seem very excited and makes another clicking sound with his mouth. He then explains that the moment they left the city, they were attacked by a force they had never seen before. It was something very different from any vampire they had ever heard of. He offers to show them the bizarre state the soldiers are in. Gunther asks if it's a circus, but Leonard says he won't be joking when he sees the situation. The bald man wants to know if they really broke the gate, and he confirms they did. The entire city nearly fell. That's why he wants Gunther to stay there protecting the bridge until everything is repaired. The protagonist, however, refuses. He prefers to stay in the rear while the flesh shields die on the front lines. Leonard immediately calls him a shameless bastard, and asks if he knows why he's even standing there. 136 comrades had volunteered to become Death Knights, and all of them died. The researchers worked endlessly to build his organs. It is because of their sacrifice and the defense of this city that he is alive. But as a gladiator, he doesn't understand what sacrifice means, since he lived his whole life just hurting others to stay alive. Leonard says that he should have been the true corpse knight, not Gunther. Gunther stares him down, approaches, and says that he's a very righteous guy, and every time he sees someone like that, it makes him want to say to their face, go to hell. Leonard draws his sword, ready to deal with this disgrace himself. The next moment, however, Leonard is sent flying out of the building, crashing to the ground below. He had been punched. Frieren pleads with him to be careful and not act aggressively while he is recharging. Gunther tells her to stay calm, that it was just self-defense. Leonard is now completely bandaged up, glaring at our hero, who says he should have finished it in one blow. Frieren begs Gunther to control himself. It's impossible for him to win this war alone. One thing the man didn't lie about is that it costs countless resources and human lives to build every part of his body. Not to mention that all the items they made are constantly decomposing. So they need more and more people offering limbs and the like. She is trying to save as many as possible and protect the sacred land so that his power source isn't cut off. Listening to all this, Gunther just asks if she's not just asking him to stay on the front lines. She replies that of course she is. That's the easiest way for them to win. He gives up arguing and says fine, but he wants a new weapon. He has shown the modifications they had, a grotesque mouth arm, and other strange parts. Gunther is horrified while Frieren asks if they really haven't produced anything else. Now, a surprisingly meek Leonard says that unfortunately, they had to protect the city, so there was no time to make various things. Gunther, on the other hand, is furious, saying they should have made a normal arm and not this disastrous mouth arm. But the doctor says it's a perfect creation. The bite had immense force. In addition, he had a large flesh shield. Frieren explains that with his own consciousness, he can increase and decrease its size. It was also more resistant than any part of his body, even to fire. Gunther, however, wants something like the bone launcher, even if it only has 6 shots. But she explains that it took 6 months to produce that one. Each weapon requires an absurd amount of ingredients and human labor. Of course, besides that, they need legs and arms. The rest of the materials were a little easier to get. He wants to know if they really have nothing else, but she says that in wartime, you take what you can get. Leonard says he has to take care of the city and wishes them a good day. He had certainly mellowed out after the punch. That night, Gunther was holding a sword, saying that finally, he has something to prepare him for a fight. Frieren tells him that, just as the other man said, creating the corpse knight required more than 100 people, the help of aristocrats, and all of royalty. Everyone together came to the conclusion that he was the perfect choice. So he doesn't have to worry about what anyone says because she believes in him. Only he could save this world. Gunther, however, says he doesn't care about that. She replies that having that mentality showed he was lucky. But then, the protagonist brings up the 136 people who died to become a human battery. She becomes thoughtful. And he wants to know why, after seeing so many die to become such a battery, she took on that role. She replies that it was because it was something that needed to be done. He just stares and says he can't understand. A while later, he's at the window, on the lookout. Suddenly, Leonard enters, telling him to prepare because the vampires have returned. He's been connected to the device all day, likely to keep his battery at maximum. Now it makes sense. He's disconnected, and Frieren tells him he needs to come back alive. He is an extremely important piece. He just puts on his helmet, and says survival is what he does. With his shield activated, he looks like a true death knight, warning that whatever comes from the shadows, he will tear it in half. Suddenly, from the forest, a twisted creature emerges, wondering why today's audience is only one person. Gunther stares, wondering why this creature is so contorted. It also seemed to move slowly. He immediately prepares for a leap, one that could launch him faster than a vampire. He would end this in one move. The monster, however, from a distance, welcomes the audience, saying that to satisfy everyone, he will give his best performance. He calls for someone named Evely, and says that part 1 of the presentation, the King of Pigs, would now begin. Suddenly, he is interrupted by Gunther, who slashes through him, declaring victory. The problem is, his blade didn't seem to cut through anything. His aim was perfect, so how did the bastard dodge? The creature begins to cry, asking why he is so rude. He should follow the order of the performance. She tells him to prepare for the next fight, where he will have to prove his will. Just then, someone shouts Gunther's name, and it's just his head, wearing that crazy smile. It seems he drowned and died, but luckily his head was cut off, and since his brain is intact, he's still alive. His body was too heavy to bring back because of the muscles, but his head floated. Frieren picks up his head and thanks him for being alive, while Leonard tells them to take him away quickly because the fight isn't over yet. Good heavens, only his head is left. Let the boy rest. Hiner is startled to see the boy's head being revived, reacting in a strange way. He tries to understand what he's saying. Arian tells him to calm down, explaining that he can't speak without a torso. The production of his new body was being finalized. He just needs to wait a little longer. However, he is trembling strangely. A while later, he's back, saying that this last fight was incredibly boring. He asks what happened, if another vampire arrived. Leonard says no, it's just that the previous one is probably still alive. Gunther says it's impossible, he bit the creature's heart. Leonard replies that he wants to believe it's true, but from where they found the head, they saw a woman's footprints leaving the water. He followed those steps and found a strange carriage, cleverly hidden from the vampires. Since they had no chance of winning, the priority was to find his body. Gunther remains in disbelief, telling him to look at the teeth that tore the monster's heart. Leonard says that's fine, but they'll have to check it out anyway, just to be sure. The entire group is now behind the bushes, and they indeed see a very suspicious carriage. Leonard tells him to go, but to be very careful. As he approaches, he sees that all the footprints are fresh. The windows are blocked, which really suggests a vampire trying to escape the sun. And if there's a high rank one in there, it's the perfect chance for him to gain an advantage in a fight. He slowly approaches the door, opens it, and finds an empty space. He walks inside, then hears a strange laugh in the background, and the door slams shut. At the same moment, something approaches to attack him by the head, but he manages to defend himself. A chaotic fight ensues in the dark where nothing can be seen. However, one of the small, knife-wielding creatures is thrown outside, and Gunther tells the rest to stay put. Another one, carrying a small house on its head, says that the one who killed the king of pigs has arrived. Gunther wants to know why they are so weak if they are vampires. The creature explains that they have difficulty walking and fighting, because they are all bodies that failed at birth. Worse still, some are failures born from failures. In other words, these creatures are truly bizarre. Gunther says he doesn't care, throws one away, and says it's time to kill everyone there because they kill humans without hesitation. The one with the little house on its back, trembling, says that's fine, just follow him, and he will lead him to the final performance. He then follows the creature, being watched by numerous others around him. He comments that the pig-like noise they make is ridiculous, especially since they aren't pigs. The monster explains it's because they were created not as humans, but as fat little pigs, and that's why they react that way. With that, he pulls back a curtain and says it's time for him to see the most beautiful product of all. There stands the strange woman from before, the so-called Evelyn. Gunther enters, staring at her as she says the audience has arrived. He wants to know why she's alive if he ate her heart. She explains that a vampire doesn't die unless the entire heart is destroyed. He only took a bite out of a part of it. The only problem is that now that her heart isn't intact, she can't use the power of her blood. Gunther thanks her, saying that explaining everything like that is very kind. But now she's nothing more than firewood for the sun. He goes on the attack, saying that this time, she won't survive. Meanwhile, outside, Leonard asks how much time the man has left. They say 50 minutes, and the plan is if another 10 minutes pass and they receive no news, they will try to go in and help. Just then, one of the knights asks if those vampires were ever human. Confused, Leonard doesn't quite understand. The man then tells a story he heard before about the children of a town called Trumps, where orphans kept disappearing. While searching for them, they found a strange place, a cellar with no sunlight, filled with tools for breaking human bones, numerous metals, and strange things. And in the back of the room, a pile of broken and stacked skeletons, all of which obviously looked like they belonged to young humans. Another knight wants to know what was happening in that place. The man explains that they were told products were being manufactured there. It seems they made and sold bizarre humans. And the smaller and more deformed they were, the more expensive they were sold for. The other knight says it's ridiculous. Who would buy something like that? The man replies that it's just a rumor. He has no idea. However, they say it was probably rich merchants and nobles. This is because having an extremely small servant was a kind of symbol of power, like a jewel or some rare material. The knight says he understands, but why would they do something like that to a person? The man suggests that maybe it was because they already had everything in this world, unless it was something unusual and rare, they didn't want it. The end of the story says that some of the survivors from that place were sold to a circus. He thought it was an exaggerated story, with no basis in reality, but perhaps these were the victims. Then he asks the heavy question to the captain, is Beryl, the place they are protecting, and the people behind that bridge, really worth it? And while they're deep in philosophy, the protagonist is tearing the door apart with his sword. The vampire says they suffocated him, scraped and broke his bones. The pain never ended. Even when he cried and begged to be killed, they ignored him. Until one day, suddenly he was released, and they said he was free. He asked why all the torment and pain for all that time, and why he was suddenly granted freedom. That's when a man with a feather in his hat said, "Hey, the fashion has passed." Evelyn laughs, her face hardens, and then she looks back at him. She says she wants to ask one last thing. What is the current fashion? Gunther tells her the fashion for him is that no matter what happens, he will survive in the end. It's the story of a man. Every scene with this, Evelyn first shows her face without speaking, and then shows her reacting, saying it's something difficult. It is certainly a lonely performance. The carriage is shattered, the sun hits, and she is completely turned to ash. It was an anticlimactic end, but perhaps intentional, just to leave a sense of psychological weight. Meanwhile, back in Barrel, the men are talking about how he has already killed 2 high-rank vampires. And from what they say, there are about 6 more around Barrel. Knowing this, one man says he will really have a lot to face. The man with the scar comments that they will have to help him, because he won't be able to resist it alone. But another tells him to stop being crazy. Why does he care about those worthless people? Besides, they had a natural fortress connected to the continent. Their side, which was after the sea, had a much better chance of surviving. Not to mention that vampires hate water. Has he ever heard of a swimming vampire? Just then, they hear a thud, then another. The man asks, "What is that?" We don't find out, because we cut to Gunther in a suit, wondering if they're really going to a festival when everything is in ruins. Arian says yes, it's time to celebrate the death of the 2 high-rank vampires, and it seems she is visiting the region outside the city. Gunther remarks that she seems to be a great person, to do something like this when lives and time are at risk. The bald man replies that the person coming is the current leader of Barrel, but it would be best if Gunther didn't say anything strange to her because she is a major headache. He doesn't quite understand, but just then, a carriage approaches. A man announces that Her Highness is arriving, the only heir of pure lineage, Her Majesty Queen Olivia Hound. Everyone welcomes her, and bows while Gunther stares at the girl. She complains that the place is dirty and smells strange. A nearby man apologizes while Gunther thinks it's madness. She says something like that in the middle of a battlefield, of course, it smells bad. The bald man is already trembling, while the protagonist doesn't care. She, however, approaches and says he must be the so-called corpse knight. She gets very close, stares at him, and says he's very ugly, probably because his body was modified. However, she heard that he has already finished off 2 high-rank vampires, and she personally came there to praise him for everything he did. One of the men beside her claps, saying he is an example, fighting so hard for the people and for the queen's heart. She thanks them for the praise, but says it's better to go inside to get out of the filth. Inside one of the houses, full of cobwebs, she complains that the place is also dirty. The man with brown hair says that everyone will be severely punished for this filth. But she says it's okay, it's a time of war, she will be generous and understanding this time. She then calls for Gunther and asks what reward he wants. Arian replies that they need more men and materials for support. She reminds the queen that numerous nobles and royalty doubted the corpse knight. However, now that the plan has been a success, and this is a way to end this war, they need more help to sustain it all. That is why she now asks for full support so they can take great strides towards peace. The queen, however, glances at her and asks if she is an Arian. She says that although she recognizes the girl's merits, how can she provide all this support with the limited resources they have? She, Olivia Hound, as the last true descendant of the royal family, needs to be constantly investing in numerous future possibilities to have various chances. So, for now, the support he is receiving is the best he will get. This is a fact that will not be changed. Gunther immediately asks what the hell she is talking about. The bald man explains that she thought this plan would fail, so they invested in various other weapons. Gunther then asks, loud enough for her to hear, if by any chance she can't admit that her plan and decisions were wrong. Arian and Linner stand before the queen, and Arian states that, at the very least, she should give official recognition to those who sacrificed themselves as part of their plan. A brown-haired attendant calls her rude, but the queen replies that while she always wanted the research, she also demanded the project be carried out in secret. She always found the idea of bringing a dead person back to be used as a knight disgusting, as something like that would only tarnish the honor of the royal family. Because of this, nothing can be made official, otherwise the knight's existence would be made public, which would be bad for everyone. Instead, the queen says the reward will be the title of count and a grant of fertile territory in the southern region. An attendant by her side praises Her Majesty's incredible and perfect judgment. The queen extends her hand and tells them to come and kiss it if they accept the reward. Gunther stares and says he can't stand this nonsense. In a situation where no one knows if they will die today or tomorrow, she's talking about honor and pride. As far as he's concerned, they brought him to a crazy woman who claims to be the queen. Humanity is screwed, he mutters. The guards in the background apologize to Her Majesty while telling Gunther to shut his mouth. The queen begins to lose her temper, telling the thing to be quiet. Just then, two men burst through the door, and Leonardo announces that a new danger is approaching. A massive creature was heading in the direction of the city, Beryl. Outside, Linner tells Gunther not to be so reckless. Gunther replies that everyone will die without him anyway, so he has no intention of respecting that strange woman. He asks Leonardo if it's true that the city of Toronto was destroyed in a single night. Leonardo confirms it. The creature appeared in an instant and destroyed everything with just a few punches, leaving nothing behind. Gunther says that doesn't make sense for a vampire, but just then, Linner trembles as he points to the horizon. In the distance, a colossal figure walks, a true titan. With every step it takes, the landscape is destroyed. Gunther asks if the meaning of the word vampire hasn't gotten a little distorted. How could that possibly be a vampire? Arian explains that a vampire is simply one who uses the power of blood, and as far as she knows, high-rank vampires with enough strength and will can do whatever they want with their blood. That vampire was likely the one known as Miranda, the Steel Titan. Its skin was said to be as hard as steel, making it impervious to all weapons. She had heard the rumors, but seeing it face to face was terrifying. Gunther remarks that it seems famous, and Arian confirms that countless studies have been done to find its weakness. He asks what it is. That's easy, she replies. There isn't one. It has no weaknesses at all. As they retreat in their carriages, Linner explains that this is all the information they have. No one has ever managed to cut its skin, so no one knows what's inside. They all come to the same conclusion: if that thing enters Beryl, the entire city will fall. Arian adds that, like any other vampire, its eyes must burn in the sun. Gunther finds this suspect. Given its size, it would have to find a very peculiar place to hide. But Arian says no. It seems that when the sun begins to rise, it transforms into a non-Titan form. It is in that moment, after the transformation, that it must be killed. It's the only chance she believes they have. Gunther realizes it's a deadly game of hide and seek. Looking at a map, Linner calculates that at its current speed, it won't reach Beryl today, giving them one day to prepare. He predicts it will likely hide in a ruined village nearby with numerous buildings. If they don't find it there, it will almost certainly enter Beryl tomorrow. The fate of the city would be decided in that village. They arrive at the village, following the gigantic footprints. Gunther immediately asks for its location, but Leonardo replies that they will first have to search all 120 houses in the area, starting from the south. He had requested more troops from the queen, but very few were sent. She had ordered the majority to remain at the base to increase her own defenses. Gunther laughs, remarking that her pride is clearly worth more than any human life. With no time to waste, Leonardo orders everyone to begin the search in groups. The search is frantic. Gunther wonders, where is this damn Steel Titan? The creature is a giant, so it was probably a large human. He focuses on searching open areas rather than cramped ones. A soldier reports that nothing has been found yet. Linner thinks something is strange. Arian suggests it might be hiding in a way that's difficult to imagine. Gunther, frustrated after smashing through 10 houses and finding nothing, hears footsteps down a corridor. He runs after them, and finds something covered by a black cloth in a corner. The scene cuts to Lord Julius, as a shadow messenger whispers in his ear. He now knows the immortal knight is there. Julius is certain it is another of Beryl's creations. He explains that Beryl is where everything began, which is why he has been delaying the end, so that everything may also finish in that same place. The time has come. He orders the messenger to inform Miranda and to bring him the immortal knight. Back in the village, the sun is setting. Suddenly, one of the houses explodes. Linner turns, shouting for Gunther. When they arrive, they ask if it's a vampire, but it's just a boy with a teddy bear walking out of the ruins. They realize it's impossible. The sun would set in an hour. If the Titan isn't here, it has already moved on. Leonardo orders the search to resume, but Gunther complains they don't even know what they're looking for. Arian says it's their only option. Desperate, Leonardo suggests they set fire to all the houses. If anything is hiding inside, it will be forced out. Arian warns this is too risky with the surrounding forest. The entire island could burn. Just then, Linner's eyes widen. He explains that Beryl is where his family is. He has a daughter he cares for deeply. They cannot give up. Gunther looks at the bald man, thinking he's finally done something with his life, as Leonardo orders everyone to search one last time. Time passes, and they find nothing. As the sun is about to set, Linner hears a sound behind him. He turns and sees something trembling inside a box. Suddenly, the entire house is destroyed, and something massive begins to rise. Linner is thrown back as Gunther says he knew something like this would happen. Arion asks what happened, and Linner says he found it in that condition. I should have killed it then, he says. Gunther asks why he didn't, and Linner explains that what he found inside the box was a child. As Gunther stands in shock, the Titan fully forms before them and prepares a punch aimed at the trio. The soldiers try to flee, but the Titan crushes them with a single step. From a distance, it can see the city. Gunther appears, carrying a massive pillar. He spins 3 times and hurls it, but it shatters against the Titan's arm like a toothpick. He leaps and throws a punch, but nothing happens. Just as they had been warned, its skin could not be pierced. He continues punching and slashing from every angle, but nothing works, until his own arm disintegrates from the effort. The Titan changes its posture and goes to swat him, but he dodges, climbing its arm. He thinks that no matter how strong someone is, everyone has a weakness. Another hand comes to clap him between its palms, but he escapes again and continues to climb. But in the midst of his escape, he slips and the creature catches him by the foot. Looking directly into its eye, Gunther wonders if this is its exposed weakness. But then, the monster simply gives him a flick with its finger that completely disintegrates his body. At that same moment, the Queen watches the Titan approach, easily crossing the ocean. She scoffs that there is no such thing as an immortal vampire. While she has never met a high rank one, she has seen plenty of low rank ones killed by normal people. That is why, she declares, we do not need that disgusting knight. Simp number 1 appears, announcing that all adjustments are complete. They were ready for launch. They had raised a massive wall of what looked like giant spears. But, if one spear can't get through, it's no use throwing 50,000 of them. The man explains that there are 100 gigantic arrows, each with the force of 100 horses. The monster's skin would be easily pierced, and its heart would be torn out. They would win without leaving a trace of it. The Queen says that the moment it falls, everyone will recognize her as the true Empress and the one who rules humanity. With that, she tells everyone to witness the power of the royal family, raises her hands, gives a glare, and orders them to fire. Meanwhile, the others are arriving at what's left of Gunther. The bald man says he can't believe it. That was what remained of humanity's hope. He tells himself he should have been more resolute. If he hadn't hesitated for a second, none of this would have happened. Arion is there, sad over Gunther, when something falls beside them. It's a small piece of his head with a little hand, trying to signal that he's still alive. They then realize he had been on top of the tree this whole time. They immediately express their happiness that he survived, while he, poor thing, can't say anything. With that, we find them in the carriage with Gunther trying to ask for new parts. He wasn't able to open his mouth properly, but Hinner watches him closely and manages to translate something about the creature's mouth not opening, so they should attack its eyes. Arion says she understands, but there's no point in trying to destroy the eye, the heart would still be intact. He says something else in Hinner's ear, who translates that the plan is to enter the body through the eye and run to the heart. Arion stops to think, and says that if they can really enter the eye that way, they have a chance. The problem is how to get to the head. Just then, they hear the shots, and the endless sequence of arrows fly towards the Titan, hitting it square in the chest. Everyone knows this was the weapon the Queen had prepared, and it seemed very powerful. However, when the smoke clears, the Titan is there, intact, and none of the arrows had pierced it. One of the men on the wall states the obvious: the Titan didn't fall and is still approaching. The man beside the Queen asks what they should do, and she demands to know the next plan. The man seems to hesitate, and she bites her lip in anger. With that, the Titan is reaching the city, and Hinner is still blaming himself, saying he should have been more decisive. Someone then calls out "Father," and a young woman runs to embrace him. She is carrying a 4-armed Gunther body on her back, and says she's happy he's safe. It's no wonder he's the great general. Hinner calls out for Audrey and wants to know why she hasn't evacuated yet. He told her to retreat when it was arriving. She, however, shows that she brought a body for the corpse knight. Now seeing her up close, it's clear she is gigantic and muscular, which is why she says he should worry about himself more than her. He realizes she has a point. Meanwhile, Gunther is in Arion's arms, trying to murmur something. The strange girl comes and extends her hand, saying she wants to greet him and is eager to meet him. He just glares at her hand with even more anger, unsure if she's mocking him. The girl apologizes, and Arion says they don't have time. They needed to connect body parts 253 and 350. They were going to climb the Titan's body. Audrey then says that if it's number 350, she made something similar. She'll connect this piece of the body and bring back that very important part. The bald man is about to say something about the footsteps having stopped when, right in front of him, the Titan's massive body comes down, hitting the girl squarely. But in the next moment, Hiner is shown having saved her just in time. The problem is that he's also about to fall, and the place he's holding onto is breaking. She tells him to stop being crazy, to take this piece of the corpse, which was the most important part, and deliver it to the knight. The ledge they were both holding onto was crumbling. However, the hero protagonist, just a head and an arm, bites down on the bald man's arm, holding on with only his mouth. He's making incomprehensible sounds while Hiner doesn't understand. At the same time, the Titan begins to advance, destroying the entire city. The people were being evacuated, and Leonard orders everyone to the edges of the island. The queen asks how long his men will last. He replies that at this rate, they won't make it through the night. She asks about the corpse knight, and he says it seems they are preparing to face the Titan in a different way. The queen says that it seems everyone will die then, since it's an island with one entrance and one exit. At least if no one is alive, there will be no one left to judge her, which in the end wasn't a bad thing. The scene changes to the parts production area, and our hero has a large, suction belt-like hand attached. He latches onto the bald man's head and gives it a pull. Gunther remarks that the adhesion is at least very good. Hiner explains it's a weapon made with the arm of a large lizard, designed for sticking and climbing. The bald man thanks Gunther for being saved. Gunther says he didn't save anyone. What he saved was the body part he needed. He didn't care if the bald man was going to die. Hiner then says Gunther is always like this, and asks if there was ever a moment when he remembers being happy in the presence of another person. Gunther looks at him and asks if he's kidding. His relatives didn't even have the courage to kill him, so they just threw the rest of the fetus in a dump. Or maybe he should have been happy in the arena, where the only option was to kill or be killed. A place where the only value his life had was the money people bet on the winner. He tells him to stop being funny, because there was nothing happy or interesting in his life. Until that moment, the only people around him were those thinking of killing him or bringing him down. But even so, he survived, because even if the whole world wants him dead, he will continue to fight and survive. There was nothing more valuable in the world than that. So he wants to compete to see who will be alive in the end. He is sure it will be him. However, Hiner then says that a life in which you only want to survive is a life in which you have nothing. Gunther glares, but just then, the rest of the men say the parts have been connected. The protagonist attaches the device from his head and stands up with his 4 arms. Arian calls to him, but he doesn't respond. She just says she would like to see him tomorrow. He turns, saying that's a joke, and walks out of the room, facing the Titan headman. Meanwhile, at the edges of the city, nearly falling into the sea, the people can only watch the Titan approaching when suddenly, it looks down and sees something climbing its legs. It's Gunther, moving like a spider. The Titan comes to slap him again. But the protagonist just leaps, sticks with his extra hands, and continues scrambling up its back. He knew that at this pace, the monster wouldn't be able to catch him, but the creature has absurd elasticity and manages to swat him away. Gunther, blasted to the ground, looks at his arm and says it happened again. He jumps back towards the Titan, starts climbing the bridge, and as the creature comes to punch, he leaps onto a falling rock and launches himself upward. He sticks once more with his lizard hands, but the beast manages to hit him again. He is thrown to the ground, but he had latched onto the tip of its hand. He notices something strange. Beneath the fist, there seemed to be a hidden place. His thoughts are interrupted as the creature shakes its arm, throwing him to the ground and counting for another slam. From a distance, Arian shouts Gunther's name as he loses a leg, then one of his lizard arms. The creature continues to stare as he screams in desperation, grabs on, and finally reaches the infamous nape of the Titan. At that moment, he just needed the monster to be distracted for a second. And right then, the creature, about to grab him, looks to the side and seems to see someone or something. It freezes for an instant. It's in that moment that Gunther launches himself up, landing on its head. The monster tries to grab him, but the scene cuts. A flashback shows a child being held, unable to do anything while their brother was being beaten, because the monster in front of them was too big and strong. Julius tells the child not to be afraid. They would create a world together where monsters didn't exist. Now we see that in the fight, the Titan Miranda hesitated, because it saw a child on the wall protecting their sibling. It was in that moment that it stopped attacking Gunther, who launched himself over its head. When the monster turned to capture him, he pierced through its hands, and managed to enter its eye. In a second, the creature disintegrated in front of everyone. The protagonist had just needed to get inside. He's now walking like a cripple with one arm and one leg. But he won. The people in the city are all staring, unable to understand what body this was, what monster it was. The child who was protecting their sibling asks if he's the person who killed the giant. He turns, says yes, and asks what the problem is. A girl thanks Gunther, saying that thanks to him, she and her younger brother were able to live. Gunther just ignores her and keeps walking. A young woman named Aldra then approaches, praising him and asking how he managed to use 4 arms and move so well on his first try. She calls him a talented, natural-born warrior and says that if he had a prettier face, they could certainly erect a statue of him in the city. How about a hair transplant? She jests. Yes, then, Frieren comes to his side, places a hand on his shoulder and says it's a relief to see him well again. He asks if she's sure, noting that her expression hasn't changed. The tense atmosphere is interrupted when Linner enters, apologizing for interrupting the pleasant mood. The queen announces that while they managed to kill the Steel Titan in the end, the damage was immense. However, thanks to her extremely precise evacuation order, almost no citizens died. Most of the weapons were destroyed, but at least the people survived. She declares that it is time to decide who must be held responsible for all the chaos and asks Captain Linner if he has any ideas. She says she heard that at a crucial moment, when he could have killed the vampire, he hesitated, which led to the disaster. She calls it a critical error that warrants public execution. Aldra pleads for mercy, explaining that although her father, Linner, was once a mercenary, he has a soft heart and has never killed anyone. The queen refuses, saying that someone must take the punishment for what happened. The more Gunther listens to this old woman, the more madness she spouts. It's true that the bald man is a coward, but he thinks it's much more the fault of the person who wasted troops on useless weapons and made it harder to find the box in the first place. But even in front of everyone, she refuses to admit that she is the one to blame for nearly getting them all killed. The queen gives a sharp look, but a new figure suddenly appears beside her, remarking that the queen is still playing a role for which she is not suited. Gunther realizes he didn't even notice the man approaching. Before the queen could understand what was happening, the protagonist's head went rolling. The man declares that he is the king's brother, and the last true royalty to have survived, the one who failed to become king, known as Velvet. And, as promised to Lord Julius, he has come to take the immortal knight. In the next scene, a soldier is completely torn apart by Velvet, who tells the others not to waste their lives so needlessly. He is the last surviving royal, and under orders from Julius, he is there to take the immortal knight. He tells them not to get in his way, as he intends to leave without killing anyone else. He holds up Gunther's head, and says they wouldn't want to die for something like this. The knights agree and part ways, letting him pass. At that moment, the queen, Olivia, steps before him and says she'd heard the rumors that her uncle had truly become a monster. He replies that she still seems to be suffering greatly, and asks if the queen or the princess will stand in his way over a mere head. She gives him a hard stare and simply steps aside. As Velvet passes, he remarks that her footsteps are noisy. True royalty makes no sound when they walk, he says, a comment that leaves her seething with rage. As Velvet is led away, the crowd watches, unreacting. Linner insists they have to stop him. If he crosses the bridge and enters the forest, it's over. The terrain is full of obstacles, making it impossible to track him. The sun will rise soon, and they have to buy time to get Gunther back. Aldra shouts, asking why he is walking instead of running. Velvet replies, true royalty never runs in front of others. They follow him to the bridge, where someone orders him to stop. It's Leonardo, standing before him with pure courage. Velvet asks if he really intends to block his path for ahead. Leonardo says yes. When asked why, he replies, because that man is humanity's last hope. Velvet finds this amusing. 100% of the humans I have met live for their own benefit. In the end, the ones who hurt humans the most are other humans. So why do you think it is worth giving your life for such vile creatures? Leonardo lowers his head, but then raises it and says that he still believes humanity is worth saving. No matter how dark the world becomes, he believes in the goodness of humans who never lose their light. He believes it is the brilliance of the righteous that will heal those who only want to kill each other. He declares that not just him, but all of them, refuse to stand by and let their choice turn them into monsters. Velvet admits it's a touching speech. It's a shame that out of the more than 1,000 people in this city, only 5 stand before me. Is that enough to stop me? Leonardo ignores him and speaks to Gunther's ahead, saying that since Gunther saved them, it is now their turn to do the same. With that, they charge. In a brief flashback, Leonardo thanks his men for supporting him. They reply that he saved their lives once, so dying is not frightening. What they truly fear is dying without meaning. Leonardo tells them it would never be meaningless. Though they are not great generals or kings and will not be recorded in history books, perhaps their small courage could create the strength for something even greater. Now, in the present, those same soldiers lie on the ground, dismembered. Beside them is Leonardo, who has also lost an arm. Velvet walks past, saying they were arrogant, but he considers their courage admirable, and for that, he will spare their lives. For being merciful is also the job of royalty, he says, and continues towards the forest. But someone tells him to wait. It is Arian. The royal asks if she intends to fight him. She says yes. He warns her that one act of mercy is more than enough. If they fight, he guarantees she will be killed. Gunther's head is clearly trying to say something. Arian replies that, but either way, they have no future without that head, so if she's going to do anything, it might as well be trying to save it. Velvet calls it another touching confession. He draws his swords, saying that unfortunately, this is where she will be killed without hesitation. He lunges to strike, but she only raises her sword to protect herself, shutting her eyes. Nothing happens. When she opens them again, the sun has risen, and his arm has been burnt. Velvet is trapped in the shadow of one of the few trees near the forest. He remarks that it was only 50 more steps, a small but important distance. The queen, Olivia, laughs at him. Truly the face of real royalty, how pitiful. Hiding under a small tree, risking your life for fear of death. She mocks him for not having low-class vampires to protect him, realizing he was exiled without any followers. Velvet confirms this is true, but he argues that destroying the tree to burn him in the sun would not be an act of honorable royalty. He insists that everything he does is to protect his honor, and being trapped is part of that process. For her to take advantage of this weakness to kill him in a cowardly way would be unthinkable for a descendant of the royal family. Arian calls this sophistry, reasoning designed to create the illusion of truth. She argues that he is only trapped thanks to the sacrifice of the knights. They must cut down the tree now to honor that sacrifice. Velvet then says that, as a member of royalty, he will make an honorable suggestion. As Arian continues to plead with Her Majesty, Velvet asks if she will listen. Strangely, the queen looks at him, and her expression changes. The scene shifts to a flashback of Olivia being called pathetic by Velvet, who chides her for her table etiquette and calls her stupid Olivia, unworthy of the royal name. Back in the present, her attendant, Patrick, asks if she really accepted the offer. She replies that avoiding a just challenge would be dishonorable, and this time, she will prove she is worthy of royalty. Or to become more worrying. She replies that she knows he must be securing a route for himself to get out alive. Anyway, it's best he disappears from her sight without a word, or he'll have his arms and legs cut off, and he'd better not forget that his grave will always be next to hers. He just replies that he understands and leaves. On the bridge, someone asks if they are really going to keep that vampire alive and why. Arian explains that it seems to be because they accepted a duel. Audrey finds this ridiculous. That man was only captured thanks to everyone's sacrifice. Arian replies that they have no choice but to accept. The bald man wants to know what duel they are talking about. The scene returns to the tree where a man raises his arms and declares that he is the true warrior among warriors. He is John Byron of the Byron family, and he was there as a representative of the great queen to finish him with these fists. It was an honorable fist duel. Basically, the two will stand face to face and exchange one punch at a time. Whoever moves a step after taking a punch loses. Audrey understands the objective is to keep hitting each other until one collapses. What she finds ridiculous is that everyone is risking their lives fighting in this place for such a stupid decision to decide the future of humanity. Heener says it doesn't matter. The objective there was to recover Gunther's head, so that was the most important thing. Normally, in this duel, you send 4 representatives. But since the man is alone, he will obviously fight all the matches. The bald man is positive, saying they can use 4 people, so they have a chance. All they have to do is make the man take one step. Boren is there, telling himself that it's possible. He can win. Since they are accepting the duel, he just has to make this guy take a single step. No matter how strong a vampire is, the face has no defense. If he lands the first punch, this guy will collapse. Then he will win this duel, which is an even better title, and maybe he can even seek the position of emperor. Honor and money were coming. The organizer then says that both have accepted the duel. You can avoid the punch out of cowardice, but if you lose your balance or move a step, you are immediately considered the loser. He says that the one who accepted the duel, Baron, would deliver the first attack. He shouts and says this is for the queen. Everyone is excited. The punch was strong enough, and indeed, the man managed to move Velvet's face, who said the punch was strong. The organizer, however, says that Velvet did not move, did not retreat. So now it's his turn. When Byron is about to say something, he takes a cannonball to the head and is sent spinning away. At the same moment, Velvet is obviously declared the winner, while everyone wonders if he died. The queen's advisor seems hesitant, while the queen replies that she didn't expect much. He only has to win once. The next to be sent will be those who have already won other duels like this. So she is eager to see how it will be. The second is the son of the Brunet family, Nicolo Brunet. The man is gigantic. Where was this legend when the creature invaded, when there was a vampire killing everyone? Even Velvet says this one really looks stronger, while Nicolo is thinking that this fight isn't about strength. He has to hit a vital point, create a panic, and then it's easy to make him move. And the best vital point at the beginning of the fight was the temple. This vampire really suffers when he gets hit because his head is completely turned to the side. Audrey seems excited, but the chapter ends. The man is about to say that Nicolo won until he sees that the vampire, although he contorted completely, did not move from his spot. Nicolo says it doesn't make sense, his entire back moved. But the organizer says the man didn't move a single step. So, there's no problem. When the man is about to say he doesn't accept, it's his turn, and he takes another lash and explodes on the ground. Another one wonders if this one died too. The third representative arrives, a man named Joseph Rambler. The man says that the most important thing in a duel like this is to know the enemy. He analyzed the patterns, had it, and is now sure how to win. An extremely crucial weakness had been revealed about the way he fights. He smiles, saying he will show it. But he is also blown away. We didn't even see the punch he threw. Audrey comments that this doesn't make sense. They were putting the lives of everyone in the city at risk. Arian comments that now all they can do is pray that the last representative makes a difference. She asks who it will be, and Velvet wants to know why it would be Gunther. His head is his possession, so he can't hand it over. The queen says she would never use the head. She never mentioned she wouldn't use Gunther. And all he possesses is the head, not the body. And obviously, the body is a bigger piece of Gunther, so it can be used. Besides, as she had sworn in the name of royalty, if he wins this duel, he will get to keep the head. Or was he afraid of running away from this fight in a dishonorable way? It seems the protagonist has his body again, and wants to know what this damn honor duel is all about, not understanding why the vampire is letting him go. The queen says in the background that this is a fight of honor, something that someone like him who has lived an insignificant life would never understand. He just replies that he doesn't want to understand anyway. Arian then says that if he wins this duel, she won't execute the bald man. Of course, he would have to win it honorably. Audrey is thankful. The queen just tells them to prepare, because the duel would take place as soon as the sun began to set. A short time later, Gunther has a new arm, wondering about the strange sensation. Hader explains that this is an arm 100 focused on torso rotation and transferring force through a punch. However, it's best to be careful because it was made in a hurry and can easily break. And the colors are a bit different, because these are the arms of those knights who were cut down when the man crossed the bridge. The protagonist is startled, saying he feels a bit strange with a little piece of each of them like this. Cheat, however, says that it's actually incredible, especially since he himself said that the most important thing was to keep living. He should have gotten used to it. His body from the beginning, and all its parts were made through the death and sacrifice of others. Gunther calms down, seeming motivated. We are now face to face with the final honorable duel, and Velvet is thinking to himself that he has used his brain a lot. He didn't expect to be in this situation, but he knew that the stupid Olivia would do something like this. Everything that has happened up to this moment is within his expectations. Besides, some of his hands are holding the bones of his lower leg. In other words, his entire body can be thrown away, and his leg will remain in the same place. It's basically impossible for him to lose this. Some would say it's cowardly, but all he has to do now is move forward and watch these idiots loose. This was revenge for what her father did to him. His evil thought is interrupted by Gunther's fist coming towards his head. The king is staring, as if not understanding. I think he forgot that if his head explodes, the body shuts down. He takes a direct hit, and exactly that, his skull goes flying. The protagonist asks if he won. The guy's head flew off, but the judge announces that he didn't take a single step, so the fight isn't over yet. Gunther pulls his arm back, saying this duel is going to be a delight, while the vampire begins to reconstitute himself, saying that was dangerous. However, now the game is over. No matter how much that idiot Olivia tries, in the end, she would never beat him. We see a flashback to just before, when they were implanting a bunch of steel bars inside his mouth. This was to help him withstand the punch. He said the taste was horrible and strange, but she said it was okay. The duel wouldn't last that long. In fact, it would end much sooner than he imagined. So, it's best he wins. When Velvet's punch lands squarely, he wonders why he heard a shrill noise. And the judge announces that Gunther did not move a single step. And now it was his turn again. He delivers an uppercut, hitting him right on the chin, sending the head flying away again. The vampire moved slightly, but stayed in place. He reforms and calls him a bastard, delivering one back to Gunther. The advisor is asking the queen if she really believes Gunther will win, and she seems unsure. Velvet's head flies off, and he almost takes a step, realizing it's getting dangerous. This strange knight was much stronger than he imagined, and his entire body is pushed back with a punch to the head. He's trying to find the best angle to punch him too, but strangely, it seems no damage is being done. The word defeat wanders into his mind. As a true royal, he couldn't lose to this dirty thing that has no qualifications. With a frightening expression, he tells them to stop laughing. He was the only vessel worthy of becoming a king. Only him. He was the only one worthy of this position. Gunther, however, was chewing on a piece of steel and says he doesn't care. Meanwhile, the man is going crazy, saying that bastard's father stole everything from him. And as if that wasn't enough to stop him from trying something again, the man cut off his arms. Gunther just says that the man's family is truly crazy. With that, Velvet reconstitutes himself, making a new arm, saying he will prove that fakes never win. He goes for another punch. However, this time, Gunther dodges. Velvet is confused, and the protagonist retaliates with a strike to the middle of his chest. Everyone is shocked, the queen is speechless, and the man is thrown far away. He immediately gets up, saying that the bastard dodged the punch and lost all honor. Gunther, however, says that the one fighting with a bunch of things holding him from behind is him. So what is he talking about honor? Besides, he was only going along with it because of the bald man. But now he's tired of it. Velvet tries to restore his arm, but realizes he can't. Just as Gunther had done to the clown, Evelyn, he had damaged the vampire's heart, making full regeneration impossible. In a flashback to their duel, Gunther grabs him by the neck and says the real fight is about to begin. However, once again, the damned Velvet says that in the name of his honored family, he has another suggestion. Gunther's suggestion is to tell him to go to hell, and he wins up for a punch to the head. In the present, the queen demands to know why Gunther dodged the final blow. Even if you were to die, even if humanity were to perish, you could not do something so dishonorable while representing the royal family. She screams, but her attendant, Patrick, asks her to calm down. Did you really see Gunther dodge? He asks. He suggests that Gunther actually took the third punch head-on, and it was his fourth punch that finished the vampire. That's what everyone saw, isn't it? Patrick asks the royal scribe what he wrote. The scribe rips out the old page and writes a new one. After Gunther received the third blow, he retaliated with a fourth and finished the vampire. Patrick declares it a perfect result and turns to the queen, affirming that this is the truth. The queen, now placated, comments that it seems she won honorably after all, and Patrick agrees that her honor was kept intact. She celebrates her victory, as everyone honors the great queen. Meanwhile, Gunther is still beating the vampire, who pleads for the madman to stop. Don't you feel any pity for an armless enemy? Velvet asks. Gunther calmly replies, I'm just going to keep hitting you until sunrise. Nothing more. Velvet continues to beg him to wait, saying he has a suggestion. He just wants the boy to listen. Another punch nearly connects with his face when the vampire suddenly says the name Julius, the last pure-blood vampire. He knows everyone must be looking for him, and Velvet has an idea of where he is hiding. If they spare him, he can lead them there. By getting rid of Julius, they would no longer have to fight any other vampires. Humanity would be victorious. Gunther says he's not an idiot. If Julius dies, Velvet dies too, so he would never do something like that. However, the vampire explains that Gunther doesn't understand how vampiric promises work. He promised Julius he would bring him the immortal night. What happens between them is not his responsibility. He is certain this is an excellent offer. Gunther stops to think. It's a tempting offer, he admits, but how about you take a few more punches before the sun comes up? As the sun finally rises, Arian asks if he will really guide them to Julius. The completely bound vampire says yes, but clarifies that he will be leading the immortal knight to Julius. His only request is that he be treated as the last surviving royal. He demands they remove his chains, as they are a dishonor. Gunther remarks that the bastard has some nerve talking about honor after everything he's done, and threatens to beat him again. Arian says they can't trust him. If Julius dies, he dies too, so the promise makes no sense. On the other hand, she wants to know why Velvet became a vampire if he doesn't want to kill humanity. Contorting strangely, He calls her a very curious little girl, but says that royalty keeps many secrets. Gunther just raises his fist and says he's trying to play word games to earn another beating. Later, while walking through the corridors, Arian notes that knowing Julius's location would be a great advantage, but there is much to prepare. At that exact moment, her nose starts to bleed. Not just blood, but a dark, purplish-red fluid. She collapses to the floor. She is rushed away, her skin flushed, and body temperature dangerously high, with strange marks appearing all over her. It's then that Gunther sees the implants embedded in her back. He asks what they are, and Linner explains it's the result of her becoming a human generator. A cocktail of drugs and potions are constantly injected into her body, and the devices on her back serve to detoxify the damage, which is what allows her energy to be passed through the transmitter. Not to mention, her intestines and several organs are compressed by the machinery. The only thing she can eat is certain types of soup. Gunther remarks that it's a miracle she's even alive. Linner agrees, saying that is why Ariane is the only one. No normal person could have endured it. He needs to find the source of her fever, then asks if Gunther is worried about her. Gunther yells that he isn't, he's worried because if she dies, he dies too. A doctor announces that her pulse has returned to normal, but they don't know the reason for her collapse. All they can do is wait. Gunther, connected to her from the background, warns that there's a problem. He knows she's unconscious, but the power bar on his arm isn't rising. Linner says he should be ashamed for trying to draw power from an unconscious person. Gunther retorts that he could just die at any moment. Linner explains that, just like him, she has to be at high efficiency to transmit power. The worse her physical state, the worse the generation, to the point that it eventually stops completely. For now, the bar isn't going down, but he'll have to stay 100 connected to her just to remain powered on. If her condition worsens, the battery could start draining even while connected. Gunther says this is a worse death than fighting vampires. Linner agrees and says that since Gunther can't leave, he should take care of her while everyone else mobilizes to find another solution. With no other option, Gunther sits by her side. His power bar never rose past 1 hour. He observes her making small sounds, sweating profusely. She was obviously in immense pain. He was told to keep wiping the sweat away, but he finds it a nuisance. He notes how small her face, nose, mouth, and hands were, yet she endured the pain of her organs being rearranged and her whole body being modified. He just doesn't understand why she was going through all of this. Just then, Aldra opens the door with more water and sees Gunther holding Ariane's arm. She apologizes for interrupting a romantic moment, and he insists he was just wiping away sweat. Aldra tells him to have a good time and closes the door. As night falls, he's still there, wiping her brow, wondering if the woman who always acted so tough would just collapse like this beside him. He remembers her saying she hoped to see him tomorrow. Sentimental, Gunther clasps his hands and admits that of all people, she was the one person he wanted to see tomorrow, too. But the sun rises, and she hasn't woken up. He's desperate, he prayed, and wiped her sweat all night. Worse, even while connected, the life duration bar on his arm was now reducing. Linner announces they have no time to lose and must resort to their last option. Ariane's function as a generator was failing, and before it stopped completely, they would have to create a new one. Gunther is taken to a room, where he sees a tombstone. Linner explains it holds the names of everyone who had sacrificed themselves to become a generator, and failed. Gunther calls it a disgrace. All those people died just to have their names inscribed in an abandoned place. 2 plague doctors enter, saying the test is prepared, and the person is ready. Gunther says it's impossible it will work, but Linner explains they don't have enough materials to try on more than one person. Gunther finds it strange that a single person volunteered. Who was the idiot this time? He asks. Linner says that his whole life he has been indecisive, just like when he failed to kill that vampire. He is tired of running away. He wants to protect his daughter, Alter. So, this time, he will do what is necessary. He is the one who will become the human generator to save Gunther. Linner is already prepared for the procedure. Even if it's not 100 successful, the moment everything is installed, Gunther might be able to draw some energy. If he can't, Linner just tells him not to worry. As the doctors lead him away, Linner asks Gunther to please keep this a secret from Alder. In the next scene, Linner's veins and nails are turning blue as he writhes in agony on a gurney. The doctors declare the first operation a complete success. They will now move on to the second. Gunther asks the blue-balled man how it feels. Not good at all, Linner replies. But at least this first part only had a 50 chance of success. And I'm still alive. So that's a good result. The protagonist praises him for keeping a positive attitude. With that, Hinner gets up, saying he has something to say while he's still conscious. Gunther says he won't listen to any deathbed secrets, but the bald man reveals that Audrey is not his biological daughter. Our hero is shocked, saying that now it makes sense why they are so different. But if she's not his, where did she come from? He then tells of being abandoned by mercenaries he had been with his whole life. He lived on the streets after losing everything. However, he wasn't sad about losing material things, but about being abandoned by the partners he considered family. Abandoned in the middle of the street, he was slowly dying when someone offered him a piece of bread. It was a little Audrey, and that's when he met her. He remembers her small, dirty hand, handing him half of the bread. Audrey had been abandoned by her parents, but he is grateful to them, because it was thanks to them that he could become her father. And just as he, who had been abandoned, managed to pull himself together because of Audrey, he hopes that in this cruel and merciless world, Gunther will eventually find someone who can heal his wounds. At that moment, Gunther's expression turns serious. The doctors enter, announcing that the second operation would begin. The gurney is taken away, and in a tool room, what looks like cauldrons are stirring while Hiner is in agony. From a distance, Audrey was standing at a window, sensing something. Meanwhile, Gunther, still connected to Orion, says that in this world, there is nothing more valuable than being alive. The energy runs out, and he shuts down. The scene changes to a tombstone. Someone comes and writes Hiner's name. 12 days, 5 hours, and 4 minutes. That was how long Hiner lasted as a human battery. The record was a failure, but he managed to provide power for 12 days. Some said it was a miracle, others that he did it through sheer willpower. And on the 11th night, another miracle happened, which was when Arian miraculously woke up from her deep sleep. She was severely weakened, but the next day she was able to function as a battery again. The moment Hiner saw her on her feet was when his health drastically worsened. Perhaps he was relieved at that moment. Finally, he tells his daughter on her bed that he never imagined that living could be so painful. But even so, in this cruel and unforgiving world, she came to him, and became his light. He thanks his smiling daughter and remembers everything, her little campfire, her doing things, wiping his bald head, them dancing. He then says she was always too beautiful, and dies. Audrey didn't even cry when she saw him die, saying it was his choice. And in the end, it was thanks to her father that Gunther managed to stay awake until Orion woke up. She would have done the same. But, of course, later that night at home, she was heard crying. Here we are the next day, with him beside Arian, asking if they are leaving tomorrow to kill Julius. A lot has been happening. She replies yes, they are out of time, and Velvet warned that it takes a few weeks to get there. Gunther comments that finally, everything is about to end, but she seemed very calm. Not only did she almost die, but the bald man died too. She closes her book and replies that she would never have started any of this if she wasn't prepared. He says he understands. Still, it was nice to see her face again. It's just good that she doesn't go collapsing out of nowhere again. She looks at him, laughs, and a little later is lying in bed with him standing motionless by the door, watching it. Someone was about to enter, but he immediately puts a sword to their neck, wanting to know why the queen's henchman is there at this hour. The man says that Gunther is a tough guy, but asks him not to be alarmed. He's not there on the queen's orders or anything like that. In fact, he's there to offer his condolences, and to say that he also owes a great deal to Captain Hiner. Gunther retorts that he acts very differently when he's near the queen. To which he replies that people are defined by the positions they find themselves in, and he will take that as a compliment. He heard they are leaving tomorrow, but before he goes, there is someone who desperately wants to see him. Gunther says he'll wake up Arian to go with him, but the man replies that no one else can come. Gunther explains about the timer and says he has to stay close so the battery doesn't drain. Is this meeting more important than saving humanity? The advisor, Patrick, replies yes. A person who wants to see him is more important than the future of humanity, and is, in himself, humanity and history. He is the king of kings and the ancestor of humans. Isn't Gunther curious to know what happened between humans and vampires? If he came with him now, he would find out everything. Going down a flight of stairs, Gunther wants to know what this king of kings business is. How many kings did this nation have? It seems he knows more people in this place who call themselves king than normal people. Patrick tells him to calm down. This different person really is the true king who ruled humanity. This person was the incarnation of truth itself. Gunther asks if he doesn't worship the queen. To which Patrick laughs and questions if he really thinks the queen looks like someone who can lead. Gunther says he's a funny bastard, and he thanks him. With that, they are in front of a luxurious, somewhat abandoned place. And Gunther remembers that it looks like that place supported by those pillars he saw in the fight. He wants to know what they are doing there. Patrick explains that this place is deep and theoretically never existed in history. It was built with expensive marble, onyx, and countless jewels. The air circulation was so perfect that no one noticed it was underground. They even have drinking water. There are enough rooms for more than hundreds of servants to reside. The truth is that the entire place known as Beryl was built to serve this location. Gunther tells him to just say what this place is, and he explains that it's where the kings of the past went before death. There, they could live eternal lives. This was called the Paradise of Kings. Gunther still doesn't understand, and says none of it makes sense. But Patrick just tells him to follow. They advance through a few more corridors, and he sees some strange paintings that looked like vampire transformations. Until in one of the rooms, he comes face to face with a guillotine with a large axe attached. And Patrick says that Julius belonged to this place. Gunther questions if it's that pure blood vampire, and he explains that yes, someone who only survives pure human blood is burned by sunlight, and also only dies if their heart is destroyed. For vampires, blood was the source of strength and power. However, pure blood vampires were beings that existed from the beginning of everything and didn't even need to drink blood. They could live eternally by consuming anything. Wonderful and noble creatures that only existed in mythology. However, eventually they discovered something incredible about these pure blood vampires. Just as a human's blood could give strength to a vampire, the blood of a pure vampire could give strength to a human. Gunther is confused, and he explains that yes, their pure blood could give youth and increase a human's lifespan. Basically, you could have an eternal life if you kept drinking their blood. Gunther asks if everyone in this place then survived on that. He explains that, in fact, it was only a few selected people, who were the king and a few servants. This is because a pure vampire's blood was almost like a mirage. The second it left the body, it disintegrated. And that's why, to have fresh blood, they needed a way to obtain it at any moment. Julius was imprisoned in that place and was constantly decapitated so that he wouldn't be conscious, and would provide blood for humans for 950 years. Gunther replies that now he doesn't even know who the real monster is. Beatrix says it was all worth it. Thanks to this man, humanity entered its era of greatest prosperity. The family of kings managed to influence everything in politics and administration. And any king on earth was sent to that place the moment they were about to die. He was evaluated by the kings down there, and they decided if his life was important enough for him to be eternal. Knowing this judgment, all kings strove to create the best possible kingdom and achieve immortality. The person who created this process was Round, who was the first of all the kings. Gunther says that first, this royal family lost their minds, and second, someone messed up, because clearly their plan didn't last forever. He wants to know what happened, and he tells him it was 41 years ago when a human gave Julius his freedom, and he escaped from this place with him. Finally, the human with a conscience. However, Patrick says it doesn't make sense. Conscience is what he didn't have. He just had to imagine how many suffer because of the freedom he gave to the vampire. Obviously, the moment he left, this underground city began to collapse. The source of eternal life was cut off, and the people in this place aged decades all at once. Everyone died in a grotesque way, one after another. It all started with the first king, and soon after, the second, called Pros, also died. However, the last hope of all, who devoted his life for thousands of years to humanity, the true king of kings, was still alive. And now it was time to come face to face with the history of humanity itself. Inside a room full of books, someone says they have been watching him for a long time. Born from death and infinitely clamoring for life. Alive, yet not fully. Dead, yet not fully. Existing between the line of life and death, the so-called Death Knight. He welcomes him to his palace. The protagonist just says he's ugly as hell, this tree, and to which the man replies that he says the same thing to him. Our hero is curious. What's this business about watching him for a long time? For a great king, it seems he lives a very quiet life. He explains that he doesn't just watch him, he keeps a record of the lives of all other people, when they were born, by whom they were raised, what kind of life they had, and how their lives ended. This is the power he possesses, to know and be aware of everything in this kingdom. Gunther says the man is a pervert, and now he wants to know, since the man knows everything. Why does he want to see him? The king, with his strange face, goes to get a book, and says that this is a book about Isabella Hound, and the story of her life. This is a woman who was about to be the great queen of this kingdom but gave up the throne and chose to run away with Julius. The book was still. Plus. Linner explains that his research is incomplete, and one of his greatest desires is to finish it. That's why he wants Gunther to ask Julius about Isabella Hound when he sees him. What did she promise him that make him want to destroy humanity? Gunther says it's no mystery. The guy probably wants to kill humanity after having his head cut off for 950 years. However, Velvet explains that hatred is an emotion that doesn't exist within pure blood vampires. 950 years is not a long time for someone like Julius. The reason he wants to kill all humans is actually a promise he made to Isabella. She gave up eternal life and the throne just to tell him something. Velvet is interested to see what choice Gunther will make, to live or to die. He can continue as a human or a monster, or he could even seek eternal life. Gunther doesn't answer. He stands recharged, sword drawn. Arian says the time has come. He just asks if she's been sleeping well. She says yes, and he thanks her, but asks her to snore more quietly. Blushing, she ignores the comment and says that Velvet will go with them, meaning Julius will know their location at any moment. Gunther understands this is a double-edged sword. Arian adds that the moment they leave the castle, all monsters will begin to hunt him. He thinks it's risky, and she agrees, but it's better than turning the entire castle into a battlefield. With that, they are on the bridge. Someone calls out to Gunther. It's Alder, who will be going with them. He comments that she cut her hair, and she says she just wanted a little change. For someone who doesn't care about others, our protagonist is quite attentive. He asks how Velvet is doing, and she says he's obviously avoiding the sunlight. When he goes to see, Velvet is shouting about the indignity of treating a royal family member this way. Gunther just shows him his fist, and the vampire falls silent. The doctors say it's time to leave. As the carriage moves forward, Gunther remembers what Velvet said: live, die, continue as a monster, or seek immortality. He gives a small laugh, and follows. From a distant tower, the queen watches them go. Meanwhile, Lord Julius waits calmly in his home for their arrival. The journey begins. Someone shouts, "What do you mean, 582 kilometers?" Velvet explains that is the distance between them and Julius. "What the hell?" the protagonist exclaims. Don't vampires know how to set up bases in accessible places? At this rate, it would take them a month to get there. He wonders if Julius even knows they are coming, and why he isn't coming to meet them partway. Velvet scoffs at his lack of understanding of a pure blood vampire's complexity. Julius has always been in the exact same place, except for the time he killed the king, and he will remain there. Gunther asks if there's treasure there. Velvet says no. It is where Isabella Hound is buried. Gunther notices Alder leaning against him, fast asleep already. Suddenly a horse rears up, and she is thrown against the wall. Gunther catches Arian to protect her. I have to protect her, he grumbles. If she dies, I die, damn it. A short time later, the carriage driver tells them to look ahead. The road is littered with countless bodies. As they get closer, the fresh smell of blood fills the air. Strangely, the bodies have no bites or cuts. They look as if they have been crushed. Gunther tells everyone to stay alert. He also orders the usable bodies to be collected. They might be able to make a weapon for him. But Alder notices something strange. All the bodies are missing their hands. From inside the carriage, Velvet says things are about to get fun now that they've entered that person's domain. When asked who, he explains that among the high-rank vampires, there are two funny, crazy guys. One of them is the handless Danest, a former slave whom everyone hated. But one thing was undeniable. He had a great talent for killing people. Velvet wonders how many of them will survive this fight, reminding them they still have 582 kilometers to go. Arian stresses that their top priority is protecting the incredible black carriage. It's a simplified version of the barrel laboratory, containing medicine and parts for Gunther's weapons. It must remain intact. Gunther, however, just replies that the priority is her. Suddenly, someone shouts, "Ambush!" A plague doctor runs towards them, warning of approaching vampires. Just as Gunther moves to engage, a carriage comes flying through the air, crashing into their rear. It is followed by something else that destroys it completely. He wonders what kind of vampire looks like a giant hand. A strange figure stands atop its fingers and declares, 30. That's today's goal. I have to get 30. The creature is disgusting, with black hair, which at least means it's a low-class vampire. It attacks with 5 or 6 hands at once. Gunther thinks there are countless ways to kill something so weak and goes to slash at its fingers. The creature remarks on his strange strength, saying he doesn't seem human, but boasts that no one can hurt the body that Dynast gave it, right as Gunther's sword pierces through its hand. At the same time, another punch hits him from the side, sending him flying. The creature celebrates, shouting that it's already gotten 2 today, but its celebration is cut short as Gunther reappears in an instant. He realizes these bastards are as unpredictable as a human hand, only much bigger. He sees 3 of them heading for the carriage. Another creature comes from behind to crush the driver, but Gunther intercepts with another slash. He asks how many there are. The driver says about 30. Seeing the man holding a crossbow, Gunther asks if he really thinks that thing will kill a vampire. If you really want to survive, drop that useless piece of crap and grab a steel chain, he orders. A plague doctor begs for mercy, but his head is crushed by one of the hands. The strange vampire uses a giant thumb and forefinger to pluck the man's small hand from his body. That's the 12th for today, it says, still far from its goal. It spots the carriage and orders everyone to follow. Dozens of hand-like creatures run alongside the carriage. Gunther grabs a chain, swings it in a wide arc, and tears through several of them. He uses the chain, now installed in his arm, to pull himself along, dodging another punch and cutting down 3 or 4 more. A doctor inside is amazed that someone can do so much damage with a chain. But just as he says it will be easy, he is suddenly killed by a small stone that was flicked through the window like a bullet. The creature says, "Here comes the next one." Another projectile is fired. Gunther sees it heading for the carriage and tries to get in front of it, but the rock shatters his sword and a spray of blood erupts as it tears through the horses. The carriage is forced to a halt. More projectiles rain down from the mountain. Gunther knows they don't have time to get the horses up. The only option is to let the carriage roll down the steep incline. "Are you trying to pull us all down the mountain?" Someone inside yells. "Yes, hold on," he shouts back, giving the carriage a final push and jumping on top as it careens down the slope. A large rock looms ahead. "We're all going to die," a doctor screams. Gunther tells him to relax, then uses his foot to brake and change direction, narrowly avoiding the obstacle. But as they round a bend, everyone screams in terror as they head straight for a cliff. Ultra spots a bridge to the side, their only chance. But they are hurtling towards the drop at full speed. Frieren screams his name, telling him to stop it. Gunther channels his inner spider, and, using his chain to snag the bridge and trying to halt the massive carriage. After a heart-stopping moment, it screeches to a halt right at the very edge of the cliff. He begins to pull the carriage to safety with the chain, with the others pushing from behind. But one of the doctors warns that the hand creatures are coming. They manage to get across just before the conflict begins again. And now we'll have cuts. Gunther approaches, strikes one pillar, then another, but the bridge somehow remains intact because the pillars seem to be connected underground. The problem is that he's running out of energy, and would have to resolve this with one final punch. He extends his arm as the creatures come across the bridge. He goes to strike, and everything starts to crumble. The damned hand creatures fall into the water and are carried away by the current. Frieren calls out to him as he says there's no way he would die here, and then faints. Meanwhile, these hand creatures are emerging from the forest, and the parts made of the special blood are instantly burned away, leaving only the man who was controlling them. They go to a cave and say they've brought some fists, speaking directly to a man named Dinest, who replies that it was a good job. But why does it seem like no one met the quota today? We can already guess, right? This is a wicked, depraved slave who had his hands cut off. Surely it wasn't fair. And now he wants several hands to get his revenge. The man is apologizing, saying there was a half-monster knight who got in the way, and they lost several friends. He says he couldn't meet the quota, and Dinest immediately wants to know what this business of not meeting the quota is. How can they not achieve something so simple with the perfect bodies they were given? And now, his responsibility for not meeting the quota will be paid for with each of their lives. The vampire is screaming, begging for forgiveness, while Dinest says he will take everyone's heart. The poor souls in the background are all crying, saying that next time they'll double the quota. Suddenly, Dinest is muttering some things and talking about the fist. I don't know what he's talking about, but he asks if the man is sure. The man says yes, he saw the fists. He then thanks them and says that this time they will be forgiven, and everyone there kneels, happy to be alive. Dinest then asks what the next mission is. He is staring at a single small hand, and suddenly his expression changes, and he says, 10,000. Apparently the hand gives him the mission. I'm not understanding this, folks, but eventually, everything will fall into place. At least this story doesn't leave loose ends. Back with the carriages, the group is following a path through the forest. The protagonist is patting Velvet, asking if he's okay, to which he replies that there are still 578 km to go. At this rate, with the mountain descent, they've only covered 4 km. Frieren is grateful that at least they protected the carriage, but Velvet, from inside, says he thinks it will be difficult. At this pace, they won't make it 100 km. They would have to give much more of themselves for the Death Knight's head to remain safe. He's laughing like a mad psychopath while Gunther admits it's annoying, but the bastard is telling the truth. At this pace, there's no way they'll survive 100 km. The horses are the biggest problem, because they are extremely vulnerable and die easily. Then, Audrey offers the most bizarre thing. They have enough corpses, so why don't they make a horse? Okay, they're not going to make a horse from scratch. It seems they want to turn Gunther into a horse, and he is not excited about it. And strangely, Arian agrees. Turning him into a large horse would make everything easier. The problem, obviously, is the time it takes to do it. Audrey tells them to relax, she would solve it quickly. No one asks for the guy's opinion on becoming a horse. The poor guide is about to become a centaur out of nowhere. While they are moving at 5 the hand creatures are coming desperately, wanting to find that bastard to meet the quota. It seems they're about to run into these guys again. Or rather, from behind, because the men are coming from the rear. And Gunther seems to be being altered with strange things. A bunch of steel bars being inserted. He asks Audrey to hurry up, and she says she's doing her best, trying to do it as quickly as possible. One of the hands, however, jumps, saying it wants the 10,000 fists heading towards Gunther. He glares at it and I don't know what happens, but he defends himself. He raised the horse's haunches, and even the demon is scared, wondering what the hell that was. It was crushed, then trampled. It's a pair of muscular horse legs. The guy's design is fierce. With this, he feels he can finish everything. Arian is about to turn and tell him to buy some time, but then she sees him like a madman, running from side to side, tearing everyone apart, wanting to know who was talking about killing him. He stomps on the creatures' faces with his horse hooves, crushing them and then turning. He almost kills Arian as a bonus. She tells him to look to the side. The creatures are all fleeing in desperation, screaming that there's a monster here. Gunther wonders if he's really that ugly. This nonsense was too tedious. It was time for them to get back on their way. However, just as she's about to comment that things would be quiet for the day, they hear a strange scream. Denist was there, saying that 10,001 really were a lot, but they were making it even more difficult by running away so much. He turns to one behind him, asks what the quota is, and thrusts his arm through him too, saying that as a bonus, he'll take his heart. The protagonist is aggressive. In a second, he's coming for a sword strike that almost reaches the guy's pupil. We see a flashback to when he asked Velvet why this guy is collecting fists. He explains that it's nothing incredible, just that there was a baron in a rural area who used some slaves on a peculiar plantation, and if they didn't meet the collection quota, he would cut off their hands. He never cared if it was a child, an old person, a woman, or a man. They all died in those times. Velvet swears that if he were king, that would never have happened. However, Denest is the type of person who says corrupt things to children. He stares at that hen, and seems to be hearing a strange voice. Velvet always wondered who that strange hand belonged to. And the worst part is that Gunther's attack, which almost hit, was stopped. Denest says he can't accept it like this. The slaves are no longer there, and he strikes Gunther in the chest, responding that now he's the one who will solve this. A strange vampire power begins to envelop his body. The man turned into a Megazord with huge hands, warning that today he will take his hand and his fist. So it was time for them to dance. Gunther is bold, saying many people have tried to kill him, but no one has succeeded yet. He's been through much stronger people and advances to attack. Denest just replies that today he will be the boy's first death and comes with a mega fist towards him. However, the next chapter begins with Arian saying that the vampire's blood has almost a will of its own. Gunther understands that they are like tools with consciousness, and she says that's why they are stronger when the pain and the will are also stronger. She then asks what kind of pain would cause the most suffering in a human. Audrey says that probably being burned alive must be one of the worst. Maybe also having absolutely no hope in life must be something difficult. And it seems this was back when Heener was alive, as he says that once he heard a scream that sounded nothing like a human, something that didn't come from the throat, but more as if it came from the bottom of the heart, like an animal. It came from a mother who had just lost her child in an accident. The three of them are silent. He says that made him think again that perhaps the most painful thing for a human is the heart of a relative, one who was forced to see a child die. And obviously, the handless Nash saw his son lose his hands and die in front of him. That would truly turn anyone into an evil villain. And now there he is, using all the strength he has to explode Gunther's arm, who obviously realized it wouldn't be that easy. Denest is a bit sad, saying he exploded the fist, but he had to take it. How is he going to meet the quota like this? He has to control his leg more. In the middle of his thought, he is interrupted by a kick from Gunther, who follows up with another, and another. The boy is delivering a Mortal Kombat combo, but the creature is intact, wanting to know if that's all the anger he feels. The protagonist doesn't understand how the creature didn't retreat or even hesitate for a second. And strangely, as he gets closer, Gunther has a strange feeling. He knows there is no enemy without a weakness. However, Strangely, he was feeling intimidated. He knew there was no way he could beat this guy at this moment. Just then, Aryan shouts from the background that they have finished packing things up, and there was no reason for him to fight. You say that to the guy who prefers to survive at all costs. With his horse legs, he runs faster than anyone. An attack pierces through his chest, opening a crater, and Dinest from a distance says he still had 10,000 fists to collect. So where does he think he's going? It looks like that one hit him in the head. Blood falls, and he's wondering if it really hit his face or how he was hit. There's an eye on the ground. It only took half his head, but his brain was still intact. And the problem is that his other eye is all closed. He can't see anything in front of him. He feels something running towards him. But there's no way he was going to die like this. He jumps, saying no one is capable of killing him, and goes to throw a punch. But he doesn't even know what he's seeing. However, the next chapter, every time something is happening, the chapter changes. We see Gunther in a pool of blood with a bunch of corpses around. A man asks why the child is still fighting. It changed absolutely nothing in his life, killing or dying. So why does he try so hard to escape death? Did he believe he would find a place where he belonged? Or maybe he had the illusion that there was some way to get revenge on the relatives who abandoned him in the trash. Gunther is telling him to shut up, but the man just says he's a crybaby who has never felt love. There is no place for him in this world. No matter how hard he tries, not a single person has ever wanted him. With that, Gunther goes to throw a punch. We're back to the moment it hit. Aryan screamed, bugged him, and told him he didn't have to fight anymore. Confused, Gunther couldn't understand why he couldn't see. He wouldn't be able to survive like this. Aryan tells him that she will be his eyes, and with her thrown over his back, he charges forward. The danger is that the flying stones could pierce him, let alone her. But when the first projectile comes, she tells him to duck, and they dodge it. Just then, Dinest leaps, and nearly stomps on them. Fleeing desperately, Gunther wonders what the hell kind of fight this is. How could he predict anything without being able to see? He wonders if he's really going to die without understanding what's happening. But Aryan grabs him, and tells him that this time, he is not alone, he has nothing to worry about. She tells him to dodge left, and he follows her movements blindly. She informs him that the carriage is 5 meters to his left, he just needed to keep going. From Dinest's perspective, they were already far away. He curses that the bastard is truly slippery. Now things were complicated. He still needed 10,000 punches to meet his goal. But that was fine. He would follow them every night until they tired. In the end, he would be the one to bring about this man's death. The scene changes to the next day. They finally stop to rest and check their supplies. Alder asks what the next part of the plan is, since the boy's head is still open. Gunther tells her to let Aryan rest a little. She's passed out. He asks if they can fix his eyes. Aryan explains that, luckily, he received no brain damage, so they just need to put a new covering on his head. His face would be fine, the only problem would be the eyes. When he opens them, he sees everyone distorted, and says something is weird. Everyone has giant heads. Aryan explains that the eye is the most complex part of his body to construct, and in a hurry, this was the best they could do. He tells her to get away from him, that she looks like a balloon. She adds that his right eye is closed and non-functional because it was so complex they had to give up. The connections are too difficult. There are too many small nerves, and their tools are inadequate. Gunther wants to know how he's supposed to fight like this and tells them to just take an eye from someone else and put it in his face. Alder says they might have some spare eyes. They try one, but he sees nothing. They try another that looks like a vampire's, and everything is spinning. With the next, he sees 8 of everything. Another, nothing. He explains that they've tried them all, and none have worked. The problem is, if they stay there, Dinest will catch up. It's better to keep moving, and try to find a new eye along the way. As he's being led, a rabbit is enough to make him nearly trip. A stone falls nearby, and he panics. Aryan assures him it's just a small rock slide, and that she'll warn him of any danger. She doesn't understand why he seems so frightened. He explains that since birth, he's been surrounded by people who wanted him dead. He could barely sleep or eat for fear of being stabbed in the back. For someone who has spent his entire life on high alert, being unable to see is almost as if the whole world wants him dead. It makes him see the person who, more than anyone, wanted him to die, the person who brought him into this world and was the first to wish him dead. As he covers his face, Aryan takes his hand and tells him to be calm. His vision would return soon, but until then, he could trust that she wouldn't let the darkness approach. He says he will try. They hold hands as they cross a river, jump over fallen logs, and travel through deserts and forests, day and night, even in the snow. He gets startled again, and she says it's just another rabbit. She looks up and says the night sky is beautiful, like pearls in a black sea. He replies that maybe it is. Alder, watching them, finally asks Gunther if he likes Frieren. He stops, thinks for a moment, and then lets out a confused shout. He's probably never even considered what liking someone means. His whole life has been killing and dying. He tells Alder to shut up, then, in a moment of sad romanticism, says he can't know if he loves someone because he doesn't understand what love is. He then cuts himself off, saying they've got it all wrong. He's only protecting her because if she dies, he dies. If he could live without her, he wouldn't care. In the next scene, Velvet is being fed, remarking that the blood is delicious today, and that he's looking forward to his next meal. The protagonist comments that it's strange, he thought high-level vampires didn't need blood. Alder explains that they need it, while fighting, or to recover. Velvet adds that the most important thing in war is supplies, which is why vampires always carried blood bags in this war. He explains that carrying a live human was too risky, so they created an innovative way to make a human lunchbox, a supply that lasts for a long time. When pressed for details, he refuses, saying their relationship is not that close. Later, they perform the 30-second eye transplant. This one is supposed to be the best yet. It's the freshest and a similar size to his old one. He opens his eye and sees slightly blurry, but much better than before. Everyone celebrates. A doctor says the donor's name was Dory, a 28-year-old man who was his friend for 10 years. He died that morning from his injuries. His dream was to be a hero who could help save the world. He asks if Gunther will remember his name. Gunther just replies that he'll try, maybe. With 414 kilometers left to go, Alder is weak from hunger. All they've had to eat are a few pieces of dried meat. She finds it ironic that the damned Velvet is eating better than they are. Just then, one of the men spots two people ahead, a man in noble clothes and a peasant woman, who say it's been a long time since they've seen other humans. They offer them refuge in their village. Frieren is suspicious. Why is there a village in the middle of a war zone? And why are their clothes so clean? The two strangers look at each other and start laughing. They apologize for not introducing themselves and explain that after countless sacrifices and experiments, they have found a way to survive against the vampires and want to share the solution with everyone. Gunther immediately says they're full of it. Frieren agrees. The soldiers also think it's better to keep going. Alder, however, plays the fool, arguing that they are running out of supplies and will starve before they reach their destination. The rest of the group starts to agree. The strangers look well fed, and everyone is hungry. Just then, one of their scouts comes running back, screaming that he's being chased by a horde of the hand creatures. Gunther says it's time to run, but one of the men points out that while Gunther might escape, not everyone will. The suspicious man from before says they can all go to the nearby village, where no one has to worry about vampires. With little choice, they follow him through a large, strangely organic-looking gate that closes behind them. Frieren saw this and said that yes, that thing there was not normal at all. In front of the entrance to a cave, the man says that vampires don't enter there, and even when they do, they don't have the courage to go inside. All they have to do is follow this path, and there's a perfect place full of food. Nothing suspicious, but without much choice, they follow. Inside, some villagers are standing there, shouting, "Good job, good job." Gunther finds this peculiar. Besides, the whole place was full of different caves and paths, so it was hard to know exactly where they were going. It was almost like an ant colony. A while later, they arrive at a place full of water, with some passages in the ceiling that seem to let in sunlight, and some plantations. The man then shows them a banquet they had prepared. Frieren finds it suspicious, and Gunther tells everyone not to eat because they don't know what it's made of. However, Audrey has already sat down and started eating. At least the man who offered it is also eating, telling them not to worry. Everything they eat there is produced there. As they can see, they have an entrance for sunlight, and water also passes through there. They grow some types of basic food, and also get some small animals, and what they need most lately is more workers. So he's very happy that a lot of people have come. Frieren says this place is big, but it doesn't seem to be natural or man-made. Besides, she doesn't see anything special that would prevent vampires from entering. So why aren't they invaded? The man closes his eyes, saying he understands this reaction. It makes sense. They also don't understand exactly why vampires don't enter this place. They fled and ended up finding a place with space to survive. It was cozy there, almost as if Mother Nature were embracing them. He then points to Gunther, and says he must be the Death Knight he's been hearing about in rumors. Surely, they must be on their way to kill the pureblood vampire. But what are the chances of success? Why risk their lives for that? They should stay there and live a peaceful life. Arian refuses but asks for supplies, while one of the plague doctors in front asks how he can stay there. Another tells him not to say something like that, but the man replies that the reason they are following the Death Knight is for him to kill that guy so everyone can live. However, it was clear that this was a suicide mission. The journey was barely halfway, and more than 20 had already died. One of the soldiers agrees, saying this place seems perfect to live in safety. And another one in the background says he's not very willing to die and become another piece of the Death Knight. This place really seems much better to stay. At that moment, Gunther comments that it will be difficult to get out of this, and wants to know if she has memorized the exit. Arian says she remembers, but unfortunately it won't be that easy to get the carriage out. He wants to know how that special body is doing, and she says there are some parts ready. However, at that moment, Audrey looks back and sees some blocks falling and forming a wall. The protagonist realizes that this whole place was as if it were a living colony, and he tells the man to say exactly what this was. However, the man continues to smile with the same peculiar face. Considering all the power there, he is certain that this is a place built by vampires. Now the question is it a place where they collect blood? The man is saying there's no reason to fight the vampires outside. They can live there, be part of the farm, and be at ease. All they have to do is one more little thing for the community. They ask what, and he says it's not even difficult. They just have to follow him, and they'll discover the secret to being in this place. Of course the trio is suspicious, and at that moment, Gunther is banging on the carriage, telling the bastard to answer what the hell is this place. Velvet wants to know what he's talking about, he has no idea. They found this place by chance. Gunther tells him to stop playing around, or he'll be killed. Velvet says he's tired of hiding. He asks if he remembers what he said about vampires taking a little lunchbox to war. And this was the place that worked to manufacture those blood packs that keep a vampire full for a while. Now everyone is face to face with this giant, strange, and like spider, wanting to know what this thing is and why there's a vampire there. The leader of the men tells them not to be afraid. The name of the vampire hidden there was Lionel. This wonderful place was all made from parts of her body, and they protect and warm her with all possible love. And all they have to do is show benevolent love to the queen. The soldiers immediately tell him to stop joking. The vampire's objective was to kill humanity, so there's no reason for this one to be taking care of them. The man says that makes a lot of sense, and that's why they made the choice to live a symbiotic lifestyle. That's what Velvet explains. She needs the blood of 6 different people, and by sucking them all at the same time and mixing it with something in her digestive tract, she can manufacture what is, in theory, their food pack. The soldiers, seeing this strange thing fall, want to know what it is. The man explains that it's a blood ball. It could be stored for more than 2 months without spoiling, and by consuming one of these, vampires don't need blood for 3 months. In this place, everyone works hard so that the queen can produce more of these. The knights are trembling, and want to know why they are producing food for the vampires who are using this energy to kill humans. Now it was explained why many of the vampires who have almost nothing to kill outside the walls still had energy. The man laughs and asks, so what? He's not killing anyone by doing this. And even if he were, the important thing is that he doesn't die. He doesn't care how many die outside. If it's not him, it's perfect, since it's safe there. The knights tell him to wake up. This won't last forever. The vampire's objective is to end the community. The moment they finish that, he would also be killed. The leader replies that makes perfect sense, but he has to ask himself how long it will take for everyone outside to die. 5, 10, maybe 100 years. In the end, he would already be dead too, and would have lived a peaceful life. It's best he chooses now. Will he stay there with everyone, or will he beg for his life every day in this place? Back in the carriage, the people are saying this place is extremely dangerous. It was better to be followed by Dinest. Just then, they hear screams, and turning to the side, the men are coming, all bloody, saying it's a shame. They needed more workers, but now everyone is dead. And since they discovered the truth about this, of course they can't leave. What if they bring someone else here? It's a shame that it's the end for everyone, since inside her belly, they were invincible. Suddenly, the ceiling begins to close. Audrey comments that they are trying to leave them all in the dark, and someone tells them to light a torch. The soldiers are all trembling when suddenly the first one is lit, and the man says it's okay. But in the same second, there are 5 or 6 more coming from behind the other. The old man closes his eyes in desperation, but when he turns back, asking what that noise is, it was Gunther, crushing everyone, having fun, cutting 3 or 4 in half, stumping on another, and a whole bunch more come for a punch. He is thrown away, exploding into his friends. The men start throwing machetes to try to cut off his vision, but Gunther gets in front and blocks everything, saying he will teach them how a real throw is done. One throw cuts down 3 or 4. He says it's comical that they call themselves immortal, but die like idiots like this. At least now they won't need anyone else to work, since not a single person will be left. The tribe leader says it's a problem. The Blood Knight is stronger than they expected. However, it's not a lie that they are invincible. It seems he forgot that they are inside the queen's belly. At that moment, the entire ground begins to move, and Audrey says that from the beginning, you could tell this whole place is a lie. Gunther realizes that everything around him is closing in and constantly regenerating. It wasn't fatal, but it was limiting his movements. And the worst part is that it seems impossible to get through these walls. He could escape from there alone easily, but he couldn't take anyone with him. At that moment, one of the soldiers says to look. The entrance they came from was closing. Immediately, Gunther runs out, saying he will take everyone, and starts moving the carriages in that direction. The men are trying to speed up, but the problem is that the walls move, and the paths close. Gunther, leading the carriage at full speed, is the first to pass, but of the other 2 that had come from behind, one passes, and the other is left behind and starts screaming. The men wonder what's happening there while Gunther just tells Frieren to show him the rest of the way. They continue to follow while he says he's going at full speed. The place continues to modify itself, the walls changing places, but the entrances seem to remain the same. Suddenly, a machete hits Gunther square in the leg. Some men appear, asking if he thinks he's going to escape. They are all the queen's body. The men are all connected there, appearing around her, smiling, saying he won't get out of there. The protagonist says they are a bunch of disgusting things. Clearly, no one in this place is alive. Meanwhile, the leader says that since 2 or 3 blades don't cut, what if they throw dozens at the same time? Several of them stick in the steel carriage. While inside, the people want to know if Gunther is okay. He's alive, holding one in his mouth, protecting his face, but he's all stuck with them. The men can't believe the bastard survived. However, just then, the friend next to him is torn apart. He laughs, saying they will regret giving him so much ammunition like this. He continues to advance, saying that if they believe they can stop him, they should come. However, Frieren warns that they should have gone left and not right. He just replies that it's too difficult to change the path, and now they will follow this route. Audrey, however, wants to know why he is provoking everyone. Meanwhile, Gunther is more focused on thinking that he has to reduce the side that is damaged. He took everything on the left this time. The problem is that it was more than he expected. And now his leg is busted. He can barely move. But it's in times like these that you have to provoke your enemy even more. It's the only way to make them get distracted, and not focus on your injuries. That's because a wounded beast is the easiest prey. The men continue to attack with a multitude of cleavers, their origin unknown, screaming that this man's death would mean victory for the vampires. They had already abandoned humanity, so they might as well help these monsters. However, in the middle of his speech, he is torn in half as Gunther tells him to go to hell. The problem is that the path seems to get narrower and narrower, making it increasingly difficult for the carriage to pass. One of them is abandoned, and the men continue on foot. Unfortunately, Gunther's torn leg breaks, and the carriage careens off course for a moment. Someone asks if he's okay, to which he replies that if his movement wasn't so limited, he would have torn all these guys apart. To make matters worse, they pass through an exit only to be met with another wall. A man warns that now they have nowhere to go. Gunther asks if he can exterminate it and open a path, but the man replies that it's impossible, the thing regenerates much faster than he can cut through it. Just as they are trapped in this room with a small entrance, on the outside, everyone is hesitating. In the end, they are human too, and know that the first to go through there will be torn apart by Gunther. A woman hesitates, but a man tells her not to worry. Everyone there risks their life for one another. Their leader said they have no reason to worry. It is indeed an exit. They have no food, no water, so time is on their side. He yells to the people, letting them know the offer still stands. They will wait for anyone who wants to live to come and join them. Why lose their lives for others when they can save themselves? He is acting like a madman while everyone on the other side is confused. Gunther curses that he needs a new weapon. Man, what do you have for me to equip so I can get out of this place fast? Frieren explains that they have a torso, a pair of legs, another pair of legs, and finally, one more pair of legs. He wants to know what the hell this is. Were they trying to turn him into a centipede? At that moment, Audrey stops to think and says that maybe it's not such a bad idea. He doesn't understand. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of this cave wait in silence for something to happen. The red-headed bald man comments that they are holding out longer than he expected, while the leader says it doesn't matter, time is on their side. Until suddenly, Gunther appears at his ear, telling him to repeat that. The man gets a shock and backs away, wanting to know where this weirdo came from. He wasn't supposed to be able to get through that wall. But man, Gunther is coming at him with about 8 legs installed, saying that this was incredible. It was time for him to tear everyone apart and make them regret it. The man doesn't understand how he can be so fast. And in that same instant, Gunther lands a heavy paw right on his chin. Good heavens. He even says that the most important thing in this world is his own life. We then see a moment from a little earlier, when they were practicing moving with so many strange legs. Man, there were even some that looked like they belonged to a rhinoceros. He's walking all crookedly. She tells him to concentrate, but he replies that she has no idea how weird this is. Frieren explains that this set of legs was made after studying the anatomy of insects. In theory, he can scale any hard mountain, and can cling to any type of slippery surface. In a second, he's already climbing everything and declares that with his speed and reach, no one can get close to him. Not to mention, he can still transform the legs into something like a scorpion's attack. He sends an attack at Frieren, telling her she dies there. But it's just a gentle touch as she says that at least this way, he has a certain advantage. The problem is, how will they escape this complex place? He asks about escaping. All he has to do is kill that queen, and in 2 hours at most. Audrey says that's an option, but the place is complex. How is he going to find where she is? He just says he'll find a trustworthy guide to take him there. And with that, he's advancing at full speed, grabbing the king of the humans, telling him he'd better say where the queen is. The human says he won't tell until Gunther starts to crush his head, and the man immediately tells him to turn right. Meanwhile, the other humans are on their tail, telling him not to talk, or he'll end up getting the queen killed. But the man, obviously, is more concerned with staying alive. I hadn't noticed they had abandoned Violet's carriage. Some guys are trying to free him there when suddenly something rushes past at high speed, and he wonders, what strange creature is that? Gunther continues to advance, telling the man to hurry up and say which way the exit is, or his head will explode, at which point he tells him to go left. The men who survive try to come from behind with their cleavers, but Gunther whips past with a tail swipe, running at 1,000 miles per hour. They can't do anything. Even though their leader is being taken, he's sure Gunther won't get past the last defense. The queen's mouth was right ahead, but Gunther launches himself, and as the teeth close, he passes through like a bullet. He remarks that this thing was quite interesting, but now, playtime is over. He was already in the queen's room, and the rest of the men are desperate, saying she's going to die, and they'll lose the fortress. At that moment, the leader realizes the truth. If this place falls, the vampires outside will kill everyone. The problem was they had no power to stop this other monster, Gunther, who knew all their secrets. This was all the fault of his miscalculation in bringing these people here, and at this rate, they would end up dead no matter what. He looks at Gunther and cries, asking to be forgiven, telling the dear knight that he risked his life dearly to bring him to this room. Gunther is a bit confused by a man crying like a child, begging for his life to be spared, weeping and saying he would serve humanity forever. All he wants is to stay alive. The men begin to drop their cleavers and all fall to their knees, also crying, apologizing, and wanting to be spared, saying that in life everyone makes bad choices, but all they wanted was to survive. Gunther laughs, calling them cute. He loves selfish people like them, who act purely on instinct. That's because he's exactly the same. And that's fine, he'll show them sympathy and give everyone a second chance. If they start running now and stab the queen in the heart, the first 10 to do so would be spared, the rest would die. Man, the guys hesitate for a second, and the next, they are all on their feet, screaming that they fight for humanity. Everyone runs towards the queen, who suddenly begins to open her mask and stares at them. Obviously, she wasn't going to die that easily without a fight, and so we don't feel sorry for her dying. We have to see what turned her into this monster. The woman observes a family holding a crying baby. Someone puts a hand on her shoulder and says it's a shame. The second wife gave birth to better children than hers. The woman looks aside and offers a deep apology to her mother. At this, the mother tells her not to forget. They invested their entire family fortune in this marriage with that dupe. They sacrificed everything to try to obtain the royal bloodline and, with it, the power that comes with it, including marrying the trash that is her father. All this hard work she's done her entire life. She'd better not forget any of it. The woman just stands there and replies that she understands. However, the mother continues to scream in her face, saying she understood nothing of the sacrifice that was made. Why did she have to fail when they were so close to getting what they wanted? Why couldn't she simply produce an heir? The cross-eyed girl says she doesn't know either. She also married a man she doesn't like, just to please her mother. She's in this land doing her best, in this unknown place, surrounded by people she's never seen. So all she asks is for her mother, the only person she knows, to treat her like a daughter. The mother, however, says that failures don't deserve affection, and that she was a useless girl. The mother goes to leave when the daughter asks if she was only born to fulfill her mother's ambitions and greed. Was she simply a tool to create children so she could forge this bond with this noble house? The mother turns and says yes. Finally, she realizes. Now that she knows the truth, she'd better be useful for something. The poor daughter is dying of hatred, but ends up saying nothing. Then, she informs her dear mother that since her purpose was to give birth to something, then so be it. She would be the tool that would create something, not the noble bloodline she desired, but something that would bring an end to humanity's suffering. And we go back to the fight with Lionel saying that she can't die yet. She still hasn't given birth to that which will bring an end to humanity once and for all. My theory is, could she be trying to create a new version of that girl who's buried with Julius? To me, it's one of the few things that would make sense. Suddenly the entire forest explodes as she flees, saying that this is too much. The humans, however, are following, saying that Gunther will only forgive the first 10, so they're going to be first. They're all on her back when suddenly something passes by, cutting them all down. Oh man, it was the damn Danes, announcing that he'd found many fists. Everyone turns to flee, while Gunther's soldiers say that at least they managed to get out of there. The protagonist then appears carrying Velvet, saying he found what he was looking for, and it's time for them to leave. Trum continues to demand to be treated with respect, but the protagonist just throws him on the ground and orders this trash to be tied up again. Meanwhile, the leader of the humans is telling another guy not to block his path, until he gets a fist to the mouth, and the guy tells him he can go to hell. He gets up to curse but hears something behind him, and it's Dinian saying he still has some fists to collect. At that moment, the leader gets up and seems to recognize him, telling Dinian not to worry, that he will help him meet his quota. He just has to tell him how many he needs, and this humble servant will collect everything he wants for him, as long as his life is spared. However, Dinian continues to advance while the leader asks what he's doing, and he's eaten, good heavens. Torn apart in the middle, and the only thing left are his little hands. Meanwhile, Gunther is running at 1,000 miles per hour with his 6 legs to pull the carriage and everyone else along. Inside, they are commenting that he certainly already knew what was going on in that production place. On the other hand, Audrey is telling the fools that they deserve to die there but will manage to buy everyone some good time. One of the guys wants to go back to kill that Lionel, but the protagonist warns that they are running out of time. Fighting 2 high-ranked demons at the same time would be impossible. He would run out of energy. Not to mention that now that her nest has been destroyed, there's nothing that blood-shitting thing can do. The strange woman, however, is running through the forest, saying that it hasn't been born yet. She hadn't yet given birth to what was needed. A while later, one of the soldiers on top of the carriage loses consciousness and falls to the ground. They immediately ask the driver to stop, saying they have to help the man. Sir Eric says he can't last another 3 days without sleep, it was too long. Besides, he's starving. Gunther, on the other hand, calls the man a failure. However, just then, he sees that he too is running out of energy and decides to take a 1-hour break. In the carriage, Velvet says that humans are the failures. His victory is so close after they destroyed the vampire's energy source. But there they are, hesitating. There were only 112 miles left, all they had to do was keep going. The group, it seems, ignored him, and there is the protagonist, Frieren, who doesn't seem very keen on it. He tells her to eat, but she says there are people who need it more than her. The angry protagonist tells the Dan woman to eat more than 5 spoonfuls. Because if she faints, he faints too. She's about to say something, but he shoves the spoon in her mouth and tells her to stop bothering him and just eat. If she doesn't eat, he'll kill her. That's for sure. Audrey says they are a romantic couple. The man beside her replies that he doesn't think that's the case. He then looks to the site and says that only 10 are left. Compared to when they left the wall, it's an absurd decline. He asks if she's sure this part of the plan will work. Everyone was starting to have their doubts. As much as he doesn't want to give up, he also doesn't want to lose his life in vain. Gunther hears this and says that no one will die in vain, because even if everyone dies, they will serve as fuel for him to stay alive. In other words, the plan will work, as long as he is standing. The man replies that if the plan depends on his will to survive, that somehow made him feel more relieved. The carriage is back on the road with the protagonist at full speed, and the people are catching and eating whatever rabbits they can. But another day passed, and Velvet said there are only 61 miles left. It was an incredible job by the mortals. His journey was about to end. It's just a shame that he'll be showing up soon. Suddenly, someone in a hat appears in front of everyone. It's Julius, who says he must be the immortal knight. It seems everyone recognizes him, and they all want to know what he's doing there. Julius tells them to calm down, and that there's no reason to fear, because he has come in peace. Although he has failed to feel sympathy for everyone's ambition, he is trying his best to show compassion. And this led him to realize that the Death Knight is making the wrong decision. The moment the mortals win this war against the humans, they will want to kill him, the immortal knight. Gunther asks what he's talking about, and Julius comes with the offer we knew he would make. It wasn't the mortals who wanted to fulfill his true desire, but Julius. That's why he asks if he's interested in hearing this offer. Gunther is a bit confused while Audrey shouts that it's a trap. He, however, tells her to shut up. He's the one who will judge whether it's a trap or not. He then tells Julius to just say what this offer is, but if it's a joke, he'll kill them right now. Julius states the obvious. He's being kept alive because they need a weapon. However, the moment the war ends, the weapon is no longer needed. And then, whoever survives, be it the new king or the true round, someone will want to kill him because he is a risky variable. Gunther is thoughtful, and Audrey tells him not to listen. This guy was making up nonsense. However, Gunther ignores her and asks how he would survive. Julius says that before that, he would have to talk to the boy. First, it was uncertain whether it would be the boy or him who would die in this fight. Vampires were closer to what mortals call death. That's why he's trying to understand everyone's will, just as he wants everyone to understand his. Gunther doesn't understand anything, wanting to know what this crazy person is talking about. Julius then says he will explain the plans he has. He wants to be the first to do something that no short-lived mortal can: understand one another. The knights don't understand anything, staring at each other, but they know that the one in front of them is Julius. Audrey, on the other hand, says that no matter how she looks at it, it seems like a trap. Arian warns that they should attack first, when suddenly Julius comments on Gunther's parents. Like any being that exists in this world, he also had to be born from someone. However, his father takes a look, looks at the sun, and says that this life is a bore. He walks outside and is burned alive. Those were the last words he spoke before stepping outside his house and dying in the sunlight, just as his mother had done. He saw his father disappear into ashes in front of him, but felt nothing. That was the feeling of having a life of mortality. Hundreds of creatures are born and die every day for him. Each of them leaves traces that become part of the earth. However, he realized that, unlike humans, vampires left no trace in this world. They disappeared completely. And the moment he realized there was nothing in the next day that he wanted to live for, he decided to face eternity. Some humans walk through the catacombs, leading the king, who approaches a coffin and says it's true. There really was a pure blood vampire trapped in this place. This was something he had been looking for his whole life. And finally, God gave him the chance to conquer youth again, along with the world. When the king opened his eyes again, his head had been cut off. The blood flows, but disappears in the same second. He screams in desperation, wanting to know why it couldn't be preserved. He didn't want to live this life where he had to keep this man captured, and dying of fear. The man beside him says it seems that nothing of a pure blood vampire exists outside its body. The king says he already knows that, but he wants them to find a solution. This is because his eternal youth will disappear when this vampire truly dies. Without him, it would be the end of the nation because he is the person who protects all of humanity, and the owner of this world. One of the servants then takes off his hood, and suggests he try absorb and cure parts of the demon. Exactly what he's thinking, feeding on his fingers, his feet, and everything else. The king did all this for the good of humanity. I wonder if the king bit everything. Everything. However, it seems that even chewing on the vampire's sausage didn't work, and he continued to see no results. In front of the mirror, he asks himself what he needs to do to be a perfect being of eternal life. The servant then says there is only one part he hasn't eaten. It's the riskiest, but probably the most effective. And obviously, they were talking about the source of a pure vampire's energy, the heart. The king licks his lips, thinking about the eternal source of the vampire's endless vitality. It's the only thing that, when completely destroyed, kills these creatures. Besides, if the heart isn't complete, vampires lose control over their blood. What no one knows exactly is how much a heart can be damaged. Maybe it would still work if it were cut in half, maybe a third, or maybe a quarter. No one wanted to take the risk, especially since they all wanted Julius to stay alive. so he cut a micro part to be able to devour a small piece. The king takes it on a plate and eats it, saying this is the feeling of perfect vitality. It was delicious. However, that small piece of heart did not guarantee eternal life, and it only made him want more and more. He began to eat larger and larger pieces, until at one point, he had already consumed half of Julius's heart. The king screams, saying he wants more and more, while the strange servant who suggested all this is just watching. The scene changes to Julius opening his eyes, and someone says he's finally awake. The girl in front of him says that the fact that his head was cut off for 900 years must make him not remember anything. However, for all this time he has been used as a tool by them, humanity. Countless humans had fed on his blood, and all she wants is to ask for forgiveness in place of each of them. She is willing to die at his hands if it eases his pain. All she asks is that he forgives humanity. Julius, however, just asks who she is. The soldier beside her says he is in the presence of the most noble of all the princesses that have ever existed, the true Queen Isabella. However, she interrupts him, saying he's wrong. She was nothing more than another human sinner. Julius then says he already knew that humans were toasting with his blood, and that they were also chewing on his heart piece by piece. However, he holds no resentment or hatred for the acts they had committed against him. This is because life had long since lost its purpose. Outside the cabin, she says they built this place far from anyone possible. As long as she is alive, she will stay by his side and protect him so that he never falls into the hands of humans again. A confused Julius asks why she is going so far for him. She just replies that she is sure that if she hadn't done it, someone else would have eventually. Time passes, and she says she brought another book. It seems it was one of the most beloved among humans. She asks if he wants her to read it. He tells her to do whatever she wants, and more time passes, books and books pile up, and she was getting old. At that moment, she screams in desperation, saying this place has been discovered, and they would have to go to the safest place that night. He says okay, and that since it is her wish, he would follow. In the carriage, Julius just observes her fearful face. They travel for days and nights. And at that moment, the man with the mustache tells the queen that, unfortunately, they had no more money or allies. And if she gives him permission, he would like to spend the last remaining days of his life with his family. She just replies, thanking the knight for everything he has done until today. A while later, she tells Julius that spending her life serving someone as incredible as him was wonderful. But, unfortunately, her time is running out, and he will be alone when she dies. Julius then says that for the first time in 100 years he had a dream. In this dream, they grew old together while their children matured in the world. In the end, they were buried together while their children surrounded the grave. Isabella replies that perhaps dreams really are impossible by nature. It was at that moment that Julius found his purpose in life. He wished that the day Isabella breathed her last would be the same day he would end his immortality. However, that dream never came true. The two are still in the cabin, and Julius says she has a year. That is the limit, until her death. But Isabella just asks if he will still be there when she is gone. He says yes, he will remain by her side, in the coffin in which she will be buried. Isabella replies that since that is what he wants, they should be buried somewhere where no one can find them. He says okay, since that is her wish. And that night, Julius dreamed once more. In the dream, he was buried deep in the cold ground, in a way that he couldn't breathe. Even so, he didn't feel uncomfortable, he was suffocating. This is because he was beside Isabella. He could feel the flesh of her body decomposing, and the insects feeding on it. Even so, for the first time, he felt at peace. And as his body fell apart, he was slowly absorbed into the soil. He begins to wake up from the dream. But looking to the side, someone says they bring words from the King of Kings. Humans are idiots because they believe that the ridiculous hints of justice they carry will never betray them. The human had stuck the sword in Isabella. At the same moment, he pulls out the sword and throws it at her, saying that the former princess is of no use, they were to hunt the pure blood vampire. They go towards Julius, who obviously gives them a glare and tears everyone apart in one attack. He walks to Isabella, and warns that her wounds were too fatal. He knows this is not the way she wanted to die. He can spare her from death by making her a high-rank vampire if that is her wish. He goes to bite her, saying she would achieve eternal life by drinking the blood of mortals, when she asks him to calm down. With time, she learned that humans don't get smarter with age, but greedier. She asks for forgiveness, but unfortunately, she wanted to leave everything behind and let fate take its course. However, looking at her hand, she says that the only regret she has was not being able to do something before she died that she could never see. Julius says she just has to ask. If she wants to see all those who did this to her killed or the entire royalty destroyed, He guarantees any wish. Isabella then says that what she wanted to see someday was a world in which no humans suffered from the greed of another. Julius then gave her his word. One day, this world she desires would be created. She then places her hand on his face and says he was still her dear, melancholic god. With that, Isabella dies, folks. And we're back with him saying that after her death, he dedicated years and years to researching ways to create a world without greed. That's when he discovered that mortals possessed a unique characteristic. They were creatures with no way out who worked together to survive by nature. The problem is that selfishness and greed always mixed with these intentions. If there is a species on this planet that was born to torture one another in the pursuit of survival, it was the mortals. That's when he came to the conclusion that for a world without suffering to exist, humanity could no longer exist, because they were the cause of greed.